Hey guys, tonight we begin our exploration into the lives of medieval knights. This chapter reveals the considerable hardships they faced. Knights are often viewed as glamorous figures from history. Their bravery and chivalry capture the imagination. However, the reality of a knight's life could be quite different. The medieval period is generally recognized between the 5th and late 15th century. A great deal of hardship marked the life of a knight. In truth, they often faced significant challenges. Understanding these aspects provides a different view of the knightly life. According to historical records, a knight wakes in a cold room. It is early morning. The sun rises slowly behind thick clouds. The damp air penetrates the walls of the stone castle. These fortresses lack modern heating systems. The wind howls outside, carrying a chill. The knight feels the cold stone beneath him. He pulls a heavy wool blanket closer for warmth. Gentle light enters through a small window. The glass is thin, sometimes only an opening. The wooden shutters creak as the sun rises further. Darkness gives way to a muted glow. The knight's eyes blink open. His first thoughts turn to the tasks ahead. A knight wears simple clothing. His garments are often made of coarse wool. Layers provide warmth. Simple linen undergarments complete the attire. The knight sits up, rubbing his face. His skin is rough, marked by the elements. The knight's nails are jagged from lack of care. Hygiene standards are low during this era. Historians have found that bathing is infrequent. Knights may wash their hands and face. Full baths are rare events. Water is scarce and must be carried. A simple basin holds water. Fresh water can take great effort to fetch. The knight may prefer the morning chill over the reality of a bath. Food is a primary concern. His stomach growls, signaling the need for breakfast. The meal is basic. There is no abundance, food must be rationed. Bread is a staple, often coarse and dark. This bread may last several days. It is made from barley or rye, depending on available grains. Meat may be available, depending on the season. A knight's diet includes salted meats. Salt helps preserve food. Fresh meat must be cooked carefully. The risk of spoilage is high. If available, there is cheese, a common food item. One hears the sounds of the kitchen. The cook stirs a pot over a small fire. The smell of porridge wafts through the air. This mixture contains grains and water. It cooks slowly. The porridge will be shared among the servants and lower-ranking soldiers. A knight observes the kitchen from his chamber. As dawn progresses, the knight rises. He stretches, muscles stiff from the hard mattress. The mattress is filled with straw or feathers. It lacks softness and comfort. The knight moves to his armor. Armor is heavy and cumbersome. It takes time to don properly. Knights wear chainmail or plate armor. Each piece fits snugly. The metal is cold against the skin. This armor must be maintained. A knight relies on a squire for assistance. The squire will help polish the armor. He will serve as both helper and apprentice. A knight's duties extend beyond battles. He manages land and local peasants. Labor is exhaustive. Knights must oversee farming and production. They collect taxes and ensure safety. Their lives stand inseparable from the land and people. This duty weighs heavily on many. The squire arrives. He carries supplies for the knight's breakfast. There is bread, cheese, and a bit of preserved meat. The knight begins to eat slowly. Each bite is small, each taste calculated. The morning meal is often hurried yet necessary for strength. The day's challenges lie ahead. As the knight eats, he contemplates his role. The responsibilities feel heavy. Warfare is often common. Yet, more than combat, political alliances dictate a knight's life. He navigates relationships, ensuring stability in the land he protects. Loyalty is paramount here. The sounds of the castle rise around him. Servants bustle to prepare for the day. The knight can hear the clanking of pots and pans. The chatter of workers fills the air. They speak in quick tones. Their voices carry an urgency. He finishes his meal and steps back from the table. The knight dresses. He puts on his armor, layer by layer. The process requires patience. Straps must be adjusted to fit correctly. Each piece weighs down. The chain mail jingles softly as he moves. He secures his sword, checking the blade. This weapon is essential for protection and status. Outside, the day begins. The courtyard brims with activity. Horses whinny in anticipation of rides. Warriors sharpen swords and prepare for training. The knight can feel the pulse of life around him. This energy contrasts the isolation of his chamber. One shares duties with fellow knights. They gather for morning practice. Skills must remain sharp. Knights train regularly to maintain readiness. Combat is both an art and a necessity. The clang of swords echoes through the yard. It grows louder as training progresses. One may also notice the peasants in the fields outside. They toil under the sun. Farming is crucial for sustenance. Knights depend on the yield for their households. Many labor under difficult conditions. Crops must grow, and laborious toil hard. The bond between knight and peasants is complex. The bond is often fraught with tension. Knights command service. They offer protection in return. Nonetheless, relations may sour. Harsh conditions create distrust. The knight feels this strain but must maintain order. Awareness of this dynamic weighs heavily. The task of managing peasants adds to the toll. Knights must balance justice and protection. Their role is not merely defensive. They must also ensure fair treatment. Reports of mistreatment can reach the castle. This risks unrest within their domain. As the sun rises higher, concerns grow. Responsibilities pull the knight's focus. The day stretches out before him. Yet beneath these duties lies a quiet loneliness. Knights seek honor, yet friendships can be few. The life carries burdens that may go unnoticed. And now, slowly, one begins to rise from the mat, preparing for what comes next. The future awaits, full of more responsibilities and conflicts. The day has just begun. The next chapter of the knight's life beckons. Please remember to subscribe for more stories like this. In the comments, kindly share where and at what time this journey finds you. The exploration continues shortly. Rising, the knight stretches. Muscles ache from the straw mattress. The chill of the morning air lingers. He readies himself for the day ahead. The knight stands, ready to dress in layers of linen. First, he dons a thin linen shirt, coarse against the skin. Next, he wraps a simple leather belt around his waist. The belt serves to hold his tunic in place. A woolen tunic is worn over the shirt, adding warmth. Now comes the heavy chain mail. The knight's fingers grasp the cool metal links. Adjusting the weight around his shoulders, he feels its familiar constriction. Each piece is an essential component of his protection. Yet, the bulk can be cumbersome, especially come afternoon. The knight fastens his breastplate, feeling the chill of metal against his skin. The armor is heavy, a common complaint among his peers. He secures the various straps across his chest and back. A fine balance between protection and mobility is paramount. Next, he bends down to arrange greaves for his legs. Metal plates slide over leather padding. The once gleaming surface reflects the faint light of dawn. As he fastens them, tension increases in his thighs. Every movement becomes an effort against the confines of his armor. Finally, he steps into his boots, worn and well used. The soles are thick, crafted for stability on uneven terrain. Lacing them up allows for comfort during horseback rides. The knight examines himself in a dim, flickering light. His reflection shows a figure prepared for the duties of the day. Moving toward the courtyard, the knight fills his lungs with the crisp morning air. He now steps outside, greeted by the rising sun. The warmth promises a brighter day. It contrasts with the morning chill he felt a moment before. In the courtyard, fellow knights are already assembling. The camaraderie is evident, yet competitive spirits linger. Bonds stretch, threatening to snap against the strains of honor and valor. As they gather for breakfast, conversations swirl between them. Tales of battles, tournaments, and quests are told, each seeking validation. Breakfast is a simple affair. Tables are set in the open air, adorned with coarse bread. Ale, thick and yeasty, fills modest wooden cups. One may also find cheeses, often aged and pungent. The meal provides sustenance for the arduous tasks ahead. Seated among peers, laughter breaks the initial morning stillness. The atmosphere buzzes with the energy of shared experiences. But not all conversations remain light-hearted, worries creep into the discussions. Debts and obligations surface, reminders of the burdens borne. One knight expresses concern over tribute owed to his lord. Discussions turn serious, voices lower in the shared anxiety. Knights are expected to maintain their lands while securing their titles. The pressure mounts with every passing moment, yet the need to project strength remains undeniable. The meal continues amidst friendly jabs and veiled jests. Each knight savors the generic flavors, familiar yet unsatisfying. The rustic simplicity of their diet speaks to their status. Varied palates, reserved for the noble classes, remain a distant fantasy. As the meal concludes, knights rise from the tables. The chatter subsides into purposeful silence. Weapons will soon be gathered. An unspoken agreement hangs in the air, training will sharpen their skills and visibility. The day grows long ahead. As they depart the dining area, sounds of armor clanking fills the courtyard. Horses are prepared for the day's activities. A few recent squires stand nervously nearby, eager yet anxious. Facing the expectation of their masters, they yearn for upcoming training. The courtyard transforms into a flurry of activity. Knights assemble their swords and shields, ready for practice. The rising sun casts elongated shadows on the stone pavement. Knights gather just beyond the courtyard, preparing for sparring. With each night's practice, a rhythm settles. The sound of swords clashing, joined by the heavy breaths of exertion. The air is rife with determination, though tinged with fatigue. Many feel the weight of both their armor and the expectations. Training maintains a structured routine. Knights pair off for sparring, their moves calculated yet fierce. Some favor lances while others prefer swords. Variations in style reflect personal preference and lessons learned. Each clash sends vibrations through the ground. The impact echoes in the courtyard. The noise becomes part of the environment, and those watching cannot help but admire the display. But beneath the surface, self-doubt looms in the shadows of their minds. The knight observes the sparring rounds. Each movement reveals insights into their skills. the top contenders put on impressive displays. But not all knights are equally skilled. Some struggle against the weight of their gear. Others fall into a routine, relying on familiarity rather than creativity. Gradually, the sun climbs higher. Training becomes more demanding. Sweat beads on brows as fatigue sets in. Knights push through the exhaustion, striving for improvement. Fewer frivolous jokes emerge, replaced by focused silence. Amidst the clashes, relationships both fortify and weaken. Styles reflect individuality while reinforcing social bonds. Challenges escalate, pride and bruises surface. As blows land, camaraderie intersects with rivalry. As the day stretches on, fatigue weighs heavily on every knight present. Breathing becomes labored. The next round looms, the knight prepares to interject. He volunteers for a spar, donning his weapon, readying himself for the duel. He finds himself facing an agile opponent. The sound of swords ringing fills him with both anticipation and apprehension. As blades meet, movements become quick and fluid. Yet, inside him brews a constant awareness of the passage of time. Rough shouts, cheers, and instructions fill the air. The knight focuses closely, aware of every breath. He remains vigilant, a lapse could mean injury to himself or others. Training has become a double-edged sword, reinforcing skill while revealing vulnerability. Time continues to pass as this rhythm traverses through rounds. The sun inches across the sky. With it, energy begins to wane. Knights age in experience but weaken in endurance. Their initial enthusiasm finds itself tempered by the day's demands. As training draws to a close, camaraderie remains palpable. The sounds of laughter return, though tinged with the fatigue of effort. Knights exchange respectful nods, acknowledging the hard work accomplished. Exhaustion melds into a unique sense of satisfaction, created from shared experiences. With training complete, all begin to backtrack toward the castle. A path worn and familiar guides their footsteps. Yet the exertion of the day leaves some feeling disconnected from their surroundings. The promises of the evening loom just beyond, while the afternoon settles. Arriving at the castle, the knight catches a brief moment of solitude. The haven feels quieter as he steps inside. He retreats to his chamber, now a sanctuary from the noise. The residual vibrations of training reflect in his memory as he sits. Obligations creep back into focus, weariness reminds him of their presence. The next hour will center on another vital task for the day. Like armor, responsibilities wrap around him. The knight remembers he will need to tend to his duties. Engaging with the serfs demands focus and empathy even amidst exhaustion. As he lingers in this reflective space, thoughts of the day ahead materialize in his mind. Responsibilities weave through his consciousness like an unbreakable thread. The varying layers of life as a knight drape over him, heavy and unyielding. Alongside the lingering fatigue, quiet determination seeps in. The knight prepares to embrace the next phase of his day. Concerns remain, the lingering context of his existence yet to unfold. Move forward now, another vital chapter waits to be written. Soon the knight will meet with peasants and fulfill his responsibilities. The castle, an intricately woven tapestry of life, breathes around him, resonating with every solemn echo of life and duty. And now, as the knight prepares to step back into the fray of responsibilities, we shift our focus toward his duties. The challenges of leadership await. Communities rely on these knights. Their expectations fill the spaces left by fatigue. They demand attention, care, and fairness as the evening begins its descent. Such is the daily rhythm of a knight, a blend of duty and burden. Each moment shapes the essence of their knighthood. And much like the cycle of day to night, this rhythm continues unbroken, as it has for generations. Stepping into the light of the hall, the knight mentally fortifies himself for the encumbrance of leadership. The air carries an assortment of scents, the aroma of wood smoke and echoes of clattering utensils from the kitchens linger. Each corner of the castle is a hive of activity, yet the weight of his role presses heavily upon him. The castle, solid and dependable, has housed many such evenings, layered with duty and obligation. He walks through the stone corridors, tracing the familiar path that leads him toward the great hall. The rhythmic clanking of his armor serves as a constant reminder of his status, yet also of his burdens. The dress of a knight is weathered, marks of countless encounters etched into the gleaming metal. Yet beneath this protective shell lies the man, tethered to duties that extend beyond swordplay and tournament. As he enters the great hall, the chatter of voices fills the space. Peasants gather near the tables, faces worn with the weight of toil, yet filled with a blend of hope and trepidation. The knight's presence commands respect. He scans the room, noting the familiar faces among the crowd. The members of his retinue also fill the hall, prepared to counsel him, as they have done countless times before. Once seated at the head of the long table, attentiveness transforms the atmosphere. The knight signals for quiet, the low murmurs gradually fade into a respectful silence. Before engaging in serious discussion, there is a ritual of offering bread and ale. These everyday items symbolize the bond between knight and serfs, an unspoken agreement forged through labor and loyalty. The knight offers thanks, as custom dictates, become imbued in the simple act of breaking bread together. The first topic of the evening concerns the upcoming harvest. Reports of crop yield fluctuate, reflecting the recent weather patterns and pests that often threaten sustenance. A peasant rises, a man with sun-kissed skin, hands gnarled like ancient roots, and presents his concerns. His voice, though steady, betrays uncertainty. He speaks of the blight affecting the wheat, foreboding murmurs echoing in response. The knight listens, absorbing the seriousness of their plight. And so, the knight issues words of encouragement, yet behind the veneer of strength lies an unsettling fear about the impact this may have on his obligations. In this assemblage, the knight strives to embody authority while remaining approachable. His role is not only to wield a sword but also to guide those under his protection. The discussion shifts toward issues of safe passage along local roads, where reports indicate banditry has increased. Another peasant speaks of lost livestock. Fear spreads throughout the room as the knight considers the implications. As the night progresses, the knight brings forth the voice of reason. He articulates plans to bolster the patrols along the primary routes, ensuring protection for those who traverse the fields and woods. The murmurs of agreement ripple through the audience, though the knight senses the underlying tension. The expectations are unyielding. He nods to his steward, silently commanding a record of these issues be kept for future reference. When the discussion wraps up, the knight surveys the hall, catching glimpses of youthful faces filled with ambition, mingled with older ones carrying the burden of years lived. The burden of leadership is tangible, it weighs relentlessly on his shoulders. Decisions that affect lives hover constantly, whispering reminders of fragility. Food supplies, safe passages, and the welfare of those reliant on him are all part of his intricate web of responsibility. As the meal concludes, a solemn ritual follows. Each knight is expected to remind themselves and others of the chivalric codes guiding their actions, honor, courage, and fidelity, etched into their very beings. Knights utter oaths that bind them to these principles they must uphold. In this somber moment, the knight reflects on the gap between these ideals and the grueling realities they encounter. He feels an unrelenting pull as the fabric of duty intertwines with personal integrity. After the nightly discussions, the knight leaves the hall, his thoughts still echoing with the weight of each concern shared. The sound of footsteps echo through the corridor as he walks toward the training yard. Here, the sounds of swords clashing and shields colliding provide a backdrop to further reflections. The yard, illuminated by flickering torches, feels alive with the energy of those practicing. Wandering among the training knights reminds him of their shared purpose. Each movement encapsulates years of rigorous drilling. Knights spar with one another, pushing beyond the limits of fatigue. Amidst the noise, a squire practices diligently, striving to emulate the masters locked in combat. The knight observes, honoring the evolution of young novices seeking to carve out their own destinies. Yet, intertwined with the pride of witnessing dedication, the knight grapples with his own experiences. Each clang of metal evokes memories of injury sustained. Training is a rigorous cycle of repetition, culminating in mastery. While honing their skills, knights confront not only the physical demands of combat but also the mental challenges bred from expectations of success. His thoughts drift back to the realities of warfare, distant and familiar. Battles fought, alliances forged, and friendships lost intermittently dance through his consciousness. The knight senses the psychological toll combat experiences imbue upon a man, a burden carried into the evenings. Moments spent in the grim shadows of what once was, unveiling a deeper understanding of the cost of knighthood. With a sigh, the knight returns to reflect on the warmth of camaraderie among knights. The air thickens with camaraderie as they exchange stories of distance traveled and rivalries reignited. Fragments of laughter drift through the air, serving as reminders that life's burdens can also produce moments of levity. As the chill of evening creeps through the yard, marking the transition to quiet contemplation, the knight retreats to his chambers to ponder the day's discussions. The echoes of life outside gradually morph into a gentle, ambient quiet. He settles into the familiar embrace of his chamber. Darkness blankets the room, and he contemplates the responsibilities lying ahead. The daily tasks intertwine further with ongoing worries and anticipations of what tomorrow may unveil. The routine settles over him like a heavy cloak, familiar yet demanding. And so, as another evening draws to a close, we reflect on the burden of leadership gleaned from just another day in a knight's life. The day offers no shortage of obligations, nor does it cease in filling the mind with uncertainty. Each experience serves to mold the character under the weight of tradition, expectation, and personal duty. Now, as the knight prepares for the next phase of his responsibilities, we delve into the daily training regimen awaiting him at dawn. The physical exertion of this routine intertwines seamlessly with the burdens of the mind, demanding strength of body and fortitude of spirit. Under the solemn shadows of night, the unyielding cycle continues, threading together purpose and perseverance as the knight must rise again to face yet another day ahead. As darkness envelops the knight's chamber, a sense of quiet descends. The stillness is broken only by the distant sounds of the castle settling for the night. The knight lies in a state of semi-consciousness, nestling further into the straw-filled mattress, feeling the cool air brush against his skin. He drifts through thoughts of the coming dawn, the sunlight creeping through the window, waking him for yet another day. With the first light of dawn, the knight stirs. The sound of roosters crowing reaches his ears, signaling the start of the day ahead. The hour is approximately 5 a.m., as it has been since his knighthood began. Even before he rises, the chill of the morning air sends a shiver through his body. It is a feeling he has grown accustomed to but often dislikes. His feet touch the cold stone floor as he rises from the mattress. The straw inside is coarse, scratching against his skin as he shifts. The knight forgoes the delicate movements of comfort and instead pulls himself to his full height, pulling together the determination required for the day ahead. In the dim light of the morning, he dresses in layers, beginning with simple linen undergarments. The linen is soft against his skin, a welcome relief against the hard surfaces he has grown familiar with over the years. Next comes the heavy chainmail. Each link of the armor is cold to the touch, a gritty texture that clinks together as he dresses. As he assembles the layers, he contemplates his many battles, wondering how armor can protect and imprison in equal measure. Once fully dressed, the knight makes his way down the dimly lit corridors of the castle. The castle walls stand tall and sturdy, constructed of thick stone. Sunlight has yet to penetrate these passages, leaving them shrouded in a grayish hue. As he walks, he pauses briefly at the window. Peering beyond the castle grounds, he observes the dew-kissed grass glistening in the early light and the vast fields stretching away into the horizon. These are the lands he is sworn to protect, a constant reminder of his duty. He descends towards the central hall, where the sounds of bustling servants prepare the breakfast banquet. The aroma of coarse bread and slightly sour ale fills the air, echoing the daily wake-up call of the lower classes. This meal, simple yet sustaining, is standard fare for a knight. The knight approaches a wooden table, where loaves of bread sit in neat rows, their crusts dusty and uneven, yet familiar. Cheeses, crafted from cow's or goat's milk, sit alongside, their scents mingling warmly. As he collects his breakfast, he takes a moment to observe the other knights who join him. The hall is filled with the sounds of clattering dishes and murmured conversations. Some knights boast of their dreams, tales of valor and glory, while others remain quiet, lost in thought. The shared meal offers a glimpse into their lives, revealing a tapestry woven of duty and camaraderie, punctuated by unspoken anxieties. The knight takes a moment to savor his coarse bread, a textured staple that fills him but lacks the richness of his noble counterparts' feasts. He pairs it with a sip of ale, warmed by the dawn's light and the anticipation of the day. Conversations settle into murmurs of old battles and youthful exuberance, a familiar rhythm that often accompanies breakfast. After the meal is finished, the knight prepares for the next stage of his duties. He exchanges glances with fellow knights as they move towards the training grounds. The atmosphere shifts, resembling the calm before a storm, filled with tension and anticipation. Each knight carries beneath him a legacy of honor and expectations, a balance as precariously poised as the sword they wield. Upon arriving at the training grounds, the knight prepares for combat practice, his stomach still settling from breakfast. The sun begins to rise higher in the sky, illuminating the expanse of grass and dirt where exercises will soon unfold. The sounds of metal clanging fill the air as other knights begin their routines, their blades striking against wooden targets. The knight grasps his sword, observing the precision required for combat. Metal meets metal as others swing their blades, the sharp sound echoing across the training area. The knight hesitates for a moment, taking in the sights around him, knights engaged in various drills, the energy buzzing palpable. He feels the weight of his own sword, heavy yet reassuring. Training begins in earnest around 8 a.m. Each knight is expected to practice techniques for combat, often repeating movements until they become second nature. The systematic rhythm of trainees fills the air with determination and growth. He focuses on footwork first, a dance of balance and agility. With each step he takes, the soil beneath becomes accustomed to his movements, yet remains unforgiving against the impact of his armor. Next, he moves to sword drills, practicing against fellow knights. Each thrust and parry becomes an extension of his will, the sword responding to the subtle guidance of his arms and shoulders. The training is often grueling and exhausting, lasting for several hours. The sharp breath of exertion mingles with the earthy scent of sweat and damp ground, a common perfume among this vocation. During these training routines, moments of camaraderie spark between opponents, also known as friends or rivals. They exchange words of encouragement, laughter punctuating the serious tones of the exercise. Meanwhile, unspoken tensions simmer below the surface, as each man navigates the delicate balance of camaraderie and competition. As the morning progresses, the knight moves on to more strenuous exercises. Various forms of combat techniques are practiced, reflecting the time-honored traditions of knighthood. The sunshine above shifts, casting shadows across the arena, but the knight remains undeterred, focusing on his abilities. He recalls captions of past battles, the lessons learned from them, driving him onward. The relentless nature of training is a constant thread in the knight's daily life. The hours stretch long, filled with sweat-drenched cloth and aching muscles, pushing him closer to the pinnacle of knighthood he aspires to achieve. Each swing and block heightens his commitment to his craft, an unbroken loop of training that holds the specter of honor close. Eventually, after hours of training, the exercises wind down. The knight retreats to a shaded corner of the practice grounds to catch his breath. The sun beats down warmly, glistening off the sweat-soaked chain mail. He wipes his forehead and reflects on the necessity of such rigorous training, contemplating the real-world implications of combat. The knight considers the day's efforts and the struggles faced during practice. It is not the mastery of technique alone that drives them, it is the anticipation of battle and the ever-looming threat that drives his desire to excel. Even as fatigue wraps its arms around him, he recognizes the importance of continual refinement. After a substantial rest, he knows it is time to return to the castle. Before leaving, he looks back at the training area, noting the camaraderie shared and the silent understanding between knights. They have all shared in the burdens of the day, bound by the code they uphold. With determined resolve, he makes his way back through the castle grounds, preparing for the next task of the day, maintenance of his armor. This crucial duty looms large in the hierarchy of knightly responsibilities, often requiring hours devoted to polishing, repairing, and ensuring gear is battle-ready. Each piece of armor tells a story of previous encounters, scars etched in metal reflecting past glories and losses. As he approaches the workshop, the familiar smell of metal fills the air. Tools line the walls, meticulously organized in anticipation of the knight's arrival. He allows his hands to graze the tools, feeling the coolness of the metal and the weight of the work that lies ahead. He lays his armor out on sturdy tables, ready to address the wear that comes with daily use. First, he tends to his chain mail. The flick of a cloth against metal produces a sound like distant chiming bells. Hours are spent meticulously polishing each link, ensuring the shine is restored and the integrity remains intact. It is a laborious task, yet one of quiet reflection, allowing the knight to focus his mind on the responsibilities he bears. The rhythmic action of polishing lulls him into a meditative state, drawing away thoughts of his next endeavors. He knows too well the costs of neglect, how even minor damages could lead to disaster upon return to battle. Metal glimmers brighter as he works under the dim workshop light, a satisfying result reflecting his diligence. As the light shifts in the shop from noon to afternoon, he exchanges pleasantries with fellow knights who enter to complete their own maintenance. They share brief laughs about past battles, light teasing resonating, yet the underlying urgency of their knightly duties remains constant. The preparation for maintenance is not merely routine, it is an enduring commitment to their well-being and the fulfillment of their knightly promise. Each polished link of chainmail radiates an expectation of valor. The knight looks out over his array of equipment, knowing that these items often intertwine with his identity itself. With the armor now polished and meticulously maintained, he considers the next item on the daily agenda, a midday meal shared with fellow knights. While much of the content of these meals is humble, the conversations held around the table carry significance beyond their simple foundation. It is here that they reflect on their aspirations, their fears, and the weight of their position within society. As he prepares to leave the workshop, thoughts reverberate in his mind. The repetitiveness of each day offers both comfort and weariness, creating a dull rhythm that only amplifies when looking forward to another meal, another gathering. Now, we prepare to transition into the next aspect of a knight's life, the communal experience of sharing a meal with fellow knights. The light-hearted chatter and deeper discussions that flow over simple foods create a tapestry of shared experiences, camaraderie, and reflections on the day's exertions. Each moment will continue to echo with the camaraderie and challenges faced by a knight, as they sit together and eat. As the knight steps out of the workshop, he senses the subtle change in atmosphere. The noise of hammering and grinding is replaced by the mellower sounds of men chatting and laughter drifting from the long tables set up beneath a shaded area. The midday meal is an anticipated event in his routine, a brief respite from the demands of armor maintenance and training drills. The smell of food wafts through the air, a simple yet robust aroma of boiled vegetables and barley stew mixed with the earthy scent of fresh bread. Unlike the lavish banquets celebrated in noble courts, the meals shared among knights are marked by humbler fare but carry significance that transcends their modest quality. As the gathering of men settles into the long wooden benches, discussions begin to unfold. The men engage in light banter about the challenges faced during training, the clumsy attempts of a newcomer, and the predictable success of drill tactics. The atmosphere, buoyed by a sense of camaraderie, lends itself to shared stories of minor victories and defeats in their training exercises. A portion of conversation revolves around challenges with fellow knights, each man recounting a recent sparring match that tested their skills. They reflect upon the toll of continuous competition, and the fear of being outperformed looms gently over the table. Each knight projects an outward confidence, yet internally they share a collective anxiety concerning their status and performance, which is tied closely to their identity. Food is consumed swiftly. The stews are warm and hearty, providing the sustenance required to fuel another long afternoon of training. Each knight eats with a sense of urgency, the days are long, and restorative measures must be taken seriously. The coarse bread, often stale from a lack of variety in provisions, is dipped into the stew, soaking in the flavors before being consumed. Occasionally, the conversation dips into deeper territory. The knights discuss news from nearby lands, exchanges about their feudal lords, and obligations that weigh heavily on their shoulders. These discussions highlight the emerging tension between duty and personal aspiration. Tales of debts owed, unfulfilled promises, and deteriorating relationships resonate across the table, reminding each man that despite knighthood's romanticism, their lives are fraught with burden. Records from the period indicate that these gatherings were essential for maintaining morale among knights. Communal meals help foster bonds amid the competitive nature of their society. It was not uncommon for knights to share not only food but also their innermost worries. The conversations reflect the vulnerabilities that run beneath the rigid structure of their roles. They delve into the code of honor they strive to uphold and how often it conflicts with practical realities of their lives. As the meal progresses, moments of silence punctuate the lively discussions, creating space for personal reflection. Each knight may glance at their surroundings, perhaps taking a brief moment to ponder their own positions within the tiers of the feudal system. The juxtaposition of their knightly duties against the trials faced by the peasantry serves as a constant reminder of their own privileges, yet it is tinged with the anxiety of maintaining that privilege. About an hour passes. The plates are cleared, and the knights clean their hands with hastily snatched cloths. Conversations begin to shift back toward light-heartedness, with stories of past tournaments and encounters with local bands resuming. Tales shared at these meals often strive to inspire young squires or to remind the older knights of their golden days. While each anecdote may appear humorous on the surface, it resonates with the reality of a knight's life, fraught with struggle and competition. With the meal concluded, each man begins to filter a way back to their duties. Laughter rises and falls as knights jokingly arm wrestle, mimicking the training sessions that are still ahead. The warm sun casts a gentle glow through the trees, signaling the transition into the early afternoon. As the group disperses gradually, there is a collective understanding that the respite has come to an end. The knight lingers for a moment, casually observing his companions. Some men begin making their way back toward the training fields, the sound of steel clinking from their armor harmonizing with conversational snippets fading into the distance. The responsibilities of their roles in society call out once again. With stomachs full of food and a refreshed sense of purpose, the knights gather their equipment and tidy up their spaces. The routine flows back, settling into the familiar schedules of training and preparation, marking the daily rhythm that punctuates their lives. Now, at this moment, the knight steels himself for the afternoon training, a regimen essential to sustaining his skills. With an invigorated spirit from the meal, he walks alongside his fellow knights, feeling the initiation of another bout that offers both camaraderie and the opportunity to display valor. Destination in mind, he rallies alongside them as they approach the training grounds. In the distance, the sound of clashing swords and the commands of trainers echo, a prelude to what awaits them. The grassy fields ahead hold challenges and the promise of valor as the knight understands that every swing and step in practice reinforces his standing in the world. Now, we turn our attention to another aspect of the daily life of a knight. The training regimen that shapes their skills and ultimately determines their worth in battle. The routines adhered to within these practices reflect not only a physical preparation but an adherence to the knightly ideals that define them. With that in mind, we prepare to delve into the focused training sessions that occupy much of a knight's afternoon, enveloping each man in the pursuit of excellence and the warmth of their shared aspirations. As the knights arrive at the training grounds, there is a palpable sense of seriousness in the air. Each man prepares himself, focusing intently on the tasks ahead. The sun hangs high, illuminating the grassy fields where wooden dummies and targets are positioned to aid in their training. The knight stands firm, adjusting the weight of his armor. Within this practice space, knights engage in various exercises, each designed to refine their skill sets and enhance their physical prowess. The field feels expansive, yet it is as if the weight of expectations closes in, defining their behaviors and camaraderie. Training often consists of several focused segments. The first might involve warm-up exercises, where knights engage in stretching routines, keenly aware of their physical limits. Documented records suggest these exercises were crucial, as they prepared the body for the rigorous demands of combat. This warm-up usually showcases the lighter components of their training, setting the stage for what comes next. Gradually, the knights form small groups. Each group selects a specific technique to practice diligently. These techniques often include one-on-one swordplay or collaborative drills where coordination between knights is essential. The air fills with the sharp sounds of steel meeting steel, punctuated by shouts or commands from trainers who oversee the exercises. Historical documents indicate that these trainers were often seasoned warriors themselves, possessing first-hand experience in battles that shaped their instructional methods. In this environment, a knight learns to wield his weapon with precision. Practice sessions last several hours, each hour filled with an increasingly intense focus. As fatigue accumulates, it becomes essential for knights to remain mentally sharp, a balance that proves difficult amidst exhaustion. Historical accounts indicate that training was both a physical and mental exercise, often burdening young knights with both physical rigor and heavy expectations. One might observe the knight within the group as he pairs off with a fellow knight. They assume stances, facing each other, swords raised, ready to engage. The initial collisions of their blades create a rhythm that underlines the commitment they share, a commitment to honor, skill, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Documented codes of chivalry emphasized the importance of these skills, as they evaluated a knight's worth within the noble hierarchy. As the training progresses, the knights have to endure not only the physical exertion but also the psychological weight of being prepared for combat. Reports from chroniclers of the time reveal the ever-looming threat of battle as an underlying tension throughout their training sessions. Each knight knows that they must hone their techniques not solely for skill, but as a vital element of ensuring survival in the chaos of warfare. The sun shifts across the sky, rays illuminating the sweat-laden brows of the knights as they continue their extensive practice. Individual knights are occasionally singled out for specialized training. These sessions may include lessons in mounted combat, a focus that becomes increasingly critical as battles often involve cavalry charges. The clattering of hooves and the bellowing of horses could be meticulously mimicked during such exercises, preparing knights for the realities they might soon face on the battlefield. Moreover, knights often find time to practice specific maneuvers designed to be executed during a charge. The implementation of disciplined formations reflects broader military tactics. This attention to the art of fighting shapes not just individual skill but also fosters coordination amongst units. Flawless execution involves awareness and understanding of both personal capabilities and the strengths of one's companions. As midday approaches, the sound of a horn signals a pause in the practice sessions. Knights gather around, some taking to drink from leather flasks, quenching their thirst with ale. Others choose to consume small portions of bread or hard cheese, simple fare that nourishes but does not distract from their ongoing physical demands. It is a time for reflection and quick conversations, often revolving around rumors of battles to come or new challenges they may soon face in the feudal structure. Time passes imperceptibly within this environment, as the knights chat, sharing fleeting moments of laughter that briefly relieve the tension of their roles. However, reflections of their labor re-emerge as they lean on the wooden dummies, breathing heavily, their bodies yearning for a respite from the exertion. This unanticipated moment of camaraderie serves as a reminder of the shared experiences that bind them together. When the session resumes, the intensity escalates once again. Knights are urged to engage in mock duels, a performance that encourages spontaneity and strategic thinking while faced with an opponent who mirrors their movements. This practice, detailed in countless manuscripts from the era, emphasizes not just strength and skill but also the importance of adaptability during confrontations. Drills repeat endlessly, knights might feel fatigue fraying at the edges of their focus. Yet, the spirit of competition drives them forward, eager to prove their valuation against one another. The practice attracts a few young squires, who observe closely, eager to learn by witnessing firsthand the expected displays of valor and excellence. As afternoon gives way to a more golden hue, longer shadows stretch across the fields, signifying the passing day. The training routines begin to draw to a close. Each knight, while eager for rest, understands the necessity of maintaining their physical condition and technical aptitude. The manual labor of training only encourages a knight's dedication to his sustenance and upkeep. For many, the physicality of martial training is not merely an obligation. It morphs into a passion, igniting the fire from which their identities of renewed chivalric expectation and personal validation arise. As the knights finish their final practices, they disperse. Each man quietly reflects on his accomplishments during that session, an introspective moment in the otherwise rigid structure of a warrior's life. The sounds of sword swinging lessens, and the clattering of armor becomes an echo fading in the distance. Now, we shift our focus to a more personal account. This time, we explore the life of a notable knight from the early 14th century. Sir Geoffrey de Chauliac, a figure born in 1300, emerged from humble beginnings. His life offers insights into the point of view of knights amid the turbulence of their era. Born in a modest household in the region of Avignon, records indicate that Geoffrey began his journey toward knighthood as a squire at the tender age of 12. This early initiation into the realm of service laid the groundwork for his understanding of the pressures and expectations that a knight must navigate throughout their life. As a squire, he learned not only the arts of combat but also the broader implications of loyalty and service. Throughout his young life, de Chauliac worked under the mentorship of a knight who instilled the values of honor, duty, and perseverance. Accounts of his training suggest that these formative years were grueling. Yet they provided the necessary foundation to his rise within the ranks. Geoffrey attained his knighthood in 1325, a transformation marked by a formal initiation ceremony. Historical records describe it as a day filled with pomp and ritual, but punctuated by the weariness of trials already faced. The initiation was not simply a transition into knighthood, it encapsulated the very essence of what it meant to be a knight during this tumultuous era. Throughout his life, Sir Geoffrey noted the demands of the knightly class. The responsibilities extended beyond personal skill as they encompassed the legacy of service to their lords, managing estates, and maintaining a position within the rigid social hierarchy of the time. His observations would later shape the historical narrative surrounding the life of knights, emphasizing the burdens they carried under feudal obligations. Geoffrey de Chauliac eventually chronicled his experiences in texts that surfaced several decades after his knighthood. His writings provide a rich tapestry woven from the very fabric of knightly existence, reflecting on the emotional and societal conflicts faced daily. The chronicles paint a vivid picture of both the honor and limitations defining the knightly life. Thus, the rigid structure of knighthood becomes evident, revealing a consistent thread of expectation tied to existence as a knight. Each individual, much like Geoffrey, faced the complexities of duty, effectively pushing against the boundaries that sought to define their worth. The challenges of warfare, the burden of economic obligations, and the weight of chivalric ideals all contributed to the multifaceted nature of a knight's life. As we delve deeper into the journey of knights, examining both personal accounts and the broader soldierly context, it becomes apparent that while valor and chivalry defined the ideals of knighthood, harsh realities often lay just beneath the surface. In our next exploration, we shall focus on the harsh realities of warfare, drawing upon significant historical events such as the Battle of Agincourt. This notable conflict not only exemplifies the bitter truths of warfare, but highlights the trauma faced by those who engaged in it. The examination of documented logistics will illustrate the burdens knights carried as they prepared to face battles that would shape both their legacies and that of generations to come. The harsh realities of warfare were starkly illustrated during the Battle of Agincourt, which unfolded on the 25th of October in the year 1415. As tensions mounted between the English and French forces, many knights prepared for what they believed would be a decisive confrontation. Historical records indicate that the English contingent led by King Henry V faced insurmountable odds, numbering approximately 6,000 against an estimated 20,000 to 30,000 French troops. The chronicler Jean Froissart provides detailed observations of the preparations leading up to this pivotal encounter, offering insights into the mindset of knights readying themselves for battle. As dawn broke on that fateful day, knights awoke to the chilling realization that they would soon engage in combat. Exhaustion marked their faces, as many had marched for days with insufficient provisions. The harshness of their experiences began well before the dawn, as raindrops soaked their armor during their retreat into the muddy fields of northern France. Soldiers often spoke of the dampness that permeated every aspect of their existence. Soggy clothing and discomfort were constants. Throughout their march, some knights reported feelings of unease and anxiety because of poorly organized logistics. Historical writings suggest that the army's supplies became overwhelmed by the sheer volume of soldiers, provisions dwindled to meager rations. Just before the battle, records indicate that the knights' meals consisted mainly of stale bread offered alongside paltry portions of salted meat. Ale, often regarded as a staple, also fell prey to the same shortages. The English knights took a moment to steady their nerves, preparing themselves for what lay ahead. They adorned themselves in heavy, cumbersome armor, which could weigh up to 60 pounds. This weight, coupled with the inherent discomfort of chain mail, made the physical demands of combat all the more taxing. As the armor enveloped them, it became a second skin. The rough metal surfaces tended to chafe and pinch at their movements. Despite these constraints, knights often felt compelled to present themselves as the epitome of chivalry, exuding strength and valor despite their anxieties. As the archers took their positions, knights found themselves aligning alongside their infantry. The presence of longbowmen became a defining characteristic of English military strategy during this period. Documented accounts reveal that the battle relied heavily on the effectiveness of this tactical unit, serving not only as a shield for the knights but also as a means for decisive action against advancing foes. In contrast, the French knights, accustomed to the traditions of chivalric combat, advanced in their full panoply, inclined toward close-quarters engagements that had characterized their previous encounters. As the first arrows shot forth, the cries of battle erupted into a chaotic symphony. Facing the storm of arrows, the knights could hardly maintain composure as they huddled behind the infantry line. Historical accounts indicate that a significant number of the French cavalry became entangled in the muddy terrain, severely hampered by both the sodden earth and their own cumbersome armaments. In the history that unfolded that day, the logistical challenges of engagement clearly illustrated the precariousness of warfare and the instability of their knightly ambitions. The atmosphere thickened as clashing metal reverberated across the battlefield. Knights wielded their swords, swinging heavy blades while desperately attempting to defend themselves against overwhelming odds. The sounds of war blended with shouts and cries, contributing to the chaotic environment that engulfed them in a haze of confusion. Several chroniclers recorded testimonials from survivors who spoke of the confusion felt amidst their ranks, leading to numerous instances where they found themselves separated from their own battalions. Despite their gallantry, many knights met grim fates as the onslaught continued. Some recordings suggest that the carnage on the battlefield reflected not only the strategies employed but also the sheer unpredictability of human conflict. Fatalities mounted, and as the hours passed, the despair among the English forces began to rise alongside the triumph against their adversaries. In the aftermath of Agincourt, the emotional toll weighed heavily on those who survived. For many knights, returning home was marked by the burden of witnessing the deaths of comrades. Letters of correspondence from that time reveal accounts of individuals grappling with profound grief and guilt, often referencing lost friendships forged through years of camaraderie. The scars left behind by combat extended well beyond the physical. The psychological impact led to sleepless nights and haunting visions that continued to plague many knights' lives as they returned to their lordships. Further complicating the reality of warfare, knights were obligated not only to fight but also to manage the personal consequences of combat. They were expected to return to stable lives, overseeing their estates, balancing the responsibilities of feudal obligations against the heart-wrenching memories of battle. The anxiety of maintaining their status as noble warriors compounded the toll taken by the bloodshed they had witnessed. Ultimately, knights faced the daunting task of reconciling valor with the grim realities of conflict, existing within a culture steeped in the honor of chivalric code yet confronted by survival's raw instinct during warfare. Their efforts to uphold ideals of nobility often faltered in the face of overwhelming odds and oppressive social expectations. The harsh truths faced at Agincourt laid a foundational understanding for the trials of knighthood throughout this era. As we turn our focus to examine the financial burdens associated with knighthood, the impact of warfare only becomes more pronounced. The cost of maintaining status amidst the demands of battle proved an ongoing challenge for those who stood upon the fringes between honor and necessity. We shall explore the economic obligations and the fiscal struggles that dictated the lives of knights during the medieval period, illuminating further complexities hidden beneath the surface of their chivalrous existence. The financial obligations faced by knights were immense. Each knight was expected to supply their own armor, horse, and weaponry. The cost of a suit of armor during the late medieval period could range from £20 to £40. This amount represented several years of earnings for the average peasant. The knight's responsibility to maintain his equipment subjected him to constant financial scrutiny. Historical records reflect how many knights struggled to sustain their status due to the high costs associated with their obligations. To compound their challenges, knights were often in debt. Documentation indicates that the costs associated with warfare, feasting, and tournaments were significant. Knights typically borrowed money from wealthier nobles or merchants, which necessitated taking on additional responsibilities or quests in the hopes of repaying their loans through land acquisitions or rewards from their lords. These debts created a heavy burden, leading to stress and anxiety about preserving their reputation. The maintenance of a horse alone could easily cost £10 to £20 annually. This included feed, care, and fodder, essentials for a knight's steed. A well-cared horse was vital for both battle and daily life. Historical accounts mention how improper care could lead to poor performance or illness, further complicating a knight's ability to fulfill his duties. The necessity for an efficient squire to manage a knight's horse compounded the financial strain. Many knights participated in tournaments to compensate for inadequate income. Tournaments held the allure of prestige and potential monetary rewards. Records from the period indicate that an individual knight could earn considerable sums, sometimes upwards of 200 marks, merely by winning a tournament. However, historians document that the expenses associated with participating in tournaments often outweigh potential earnings. Knights faced the necessity of meticulous training, equipping their horses, and maintaining their armor, all aspects that demanded financial investment before any prize could be claimed. Knights frequently faced urgent situations where not only their livelihoods but also their honor were at stake. Historical instances reveal the plight of several noblemen who fell into cycles of indebtedness, ultimately losing their estates and honor as a result. As documented in the Chronicles of England, one notable knight, Sir Robert de Lisle, found himself facing bankruptcy by 1354, owing an overwhelming sum of £200 to his creditors. Generational legacies could be shattered by the inability to pay off debts, leaving once esteemed knights and their families relegated to disgrace. Additionally, the need to provide for retainers added to these burdens. A knight typically required a retinue of squires and servants. Payment or sustenance for these individuals came directly from his resources. Documentation from the late 14th century illustrates a knight employing 4 squires and a couple of additional servants to assist with daily tasks, putting further strain on the financial viability. This need for a retinue showcased the reality that a knight's status was not only dictated by personal ability but also by the expansiveness of his resources. Moreover, the feudal obligations each knight owed to his lord created a tense relationship. Knights were obligated to serve in military campaigns and participate in battles whenever called upon. The risks associated with these responsibilities increasingly became apparent as the frequency of conflicts rose during the late medieval period. The Compendium of Feudal Duties provides extensive accounts detailing how knights served at the behest of their nobles without the security of compensation. Their very livelihoods depended on the whims of those above them within the feudal hierarchy. A knight's income, therefore, was often dependent on successful battles and the spoils of war. There existed tension between loyalty and financial survival, creating myriad moral dilemmas. Knights, too, grappled with the stark realities of whether their service resulted in any tangible economic return. The chronicler Jean Froissart noted instances where victories did not translate into wealth for the knightly class at all. Instead, they returned to uneventful lives burdened by the memories of battle rather than triumph. Beyond the immediate financial implications, knights faced societal pressures as well. As written in a letter from Hugh of St. Omer in 1340, the sense of competition among the knightly class exacerbated financial struggles, urging them to constantly seek accolades to retain their standing. The need for social validation through demonstrating valor on the battlefield or through tournament victories required continual investment of resources and time. The economic burdens of knighthood shed light on the everyday challenges faced by these warriors. The exhausting pursuit of honor, tempered by financial obligations, deeply affected their lives. The combination of debt, competition, and external pressures resulted in an intricate web of responsibility, often leading to unanticipated consequences for their estates and families. In reflecting upon the intricacies of finances, the knightly identity emerges not simply as one of valor and chivalry, but as a complex interplay of economic realities, existential pressure, and the ceaseless pursuit of status. As knights devoted their efforts to uphold their land and title, they often confronted more than mere battlefield foes. Their adversities included the relentless quest for financial stability amid the demands of their feudal obligations. As we transition to consider another critical aspect of knighthood, we will delve into the chivalric codes that influence knights' behaviors and attitudes. These codes served as a framework for honor and duty, introducing a set of ideals they were expected to follow. Yet, the embodiment of these principles often conflicted with the harsh realities of their responsibilities, leaving knights caught in a cycle of aspiration and stark truth. The concept of chivalry, as practiced by knights, was steeped in tradition and expectation. It influenced day-to-day behaviors and interactions while simultaneously complicating their lives. In the context of the medieval knight, the chivalric codes formed a set of ideals regarding honor, loyalty, and courtly behavior. These ideals were often found in literature and tales, such as the Chanson de Roland, which extolled the virtues of heroism and fidelity. Knights were expected to serve their lords with unwavering loyalty. Records indicate that this loyalty often translated into rigid expectations to defend their lords' lands. Those who failed to meet these expectations faced judgment and scrutiny from fellow knights. The pressure was compounded by the need to exemplify virtues expected by society, which deemed valor as the highest of traits. Historically, these codes outlined not only expectations for warfare but also behavior towards women and other members of the feudal hierarchy. The ideals of courtly love, although romanticized in tales, added a layer of obligation for knights to behave gallantly in social settings. They were expected to act nobly in all affairs, extending respect to ladies and engaging in acts to earn their favor. Such codes formed an intricate social web, ultimately leading to both admiration and contempt among peers. Knights maintained a dual existence, grappling with the serene ideal of chivalry while contending with the often brutal reality of warfare. The paradox of striving to uphold lofty ideals while enduring the harshness of daily life was unavoidable. As documented in the writings of Sir Geoffrey de Chauliac, knights often faced a significant internal conflict between their noble aspirations and the grim tasks they were charged with undertaking. In times of peace, knights engaged in training and martial exercises that would prepare them for possible conflict. However, records illustrate that even gentle training in the arts of war was not without its toll. Knights practiced combat techniques, and the strain of training often left lasting effects on their bodies. Their daily regimens, beginning early and extending through the afternoon, were exhausting. Not unlike their earlier training sessions, the periods of combat preparation were laden with tension. Each knight was aware of the stakes involved. The practice of swordplay and other martial drills contributed to their physical prowess, yet the pressure to exemplify prowess plagued many knights. This pursuit of perfection led to injury, fatigue, and occasional confrontation among peers, all while they aspired to uphold the values of chivalry. At noon, when the day's warmth began to settle over them, knights would gather for a midday meal, often held in the communal hall of a lord's castle. These meals were simple yet significant events. As their bodies craved nourishment, the shared moment also provided an opportunity for camaraderie. Despite the shared meals, the atmosphere could prove competitive and contentious. Discussions of glory and victories were not mere accounts of past deeds, but calculated performances designed to elevate one's standing. Dinner tables featured coarse bread, seasoned vegetables, and thin stews, often accompanied by ale or mead. The food was rationed based on the knight's rank and the lord's generosity. Wealthier knights might find women serving richer dishes adorned with flavor, while those with less fortune often endured bland and plain meals. This variability served as a reminder of their standing within the feudal system, reinforcing the competitive nature of their dinners. The conversations shared at these meals were often determined by the needs of the moment. Knights engaged in an evolving ritual of bragging and recounting exploits from past encounters. Tales of bravery recounted in exaggerated fashion seemed to elevate their social stakes. Yet, the pressure always lingered just beneath the surface. Tales recounted bore the weight of personal insecurity and the need to find validation in the eyes of peers. In the days leading up to a pivotal battle or tournament, there was a heightened sense of competition among knights. The stakes escalated when juxtaposing personal honor against the backdrop of chivalric ideals. The tension weighed heavily upon them, as internalized expectations clashed with the reality of their vulnerabilities. As the sun began to decline, their communal gatherings would wind to a close. Knights would disperse into different sectors of the castle to partake in independent obligations. In the workshops, servants and craftsmen toiled across the estate, ensuring that their armors remained polished and functional. The sounds of metal hammering against metal filled the air as they prepared for the upcoming duties. Maintaining armor was a laborious task. Knights themselves understood their gear was essential, yet many did not possess the dexterity required to tend to it effectively. Contracted blacksmiths and craftsmen would take center stage in these workshops, offering their skills to knights. Yet, this reliance on others fostered a subtle resentment. Knights felt a sense of impotence in not fully controlling the maintenance of their own instruments of battle. Armor maintenance often became an essential afternoon ritual. Knights might spend hours rubbing oil into the metal and testing the strength of links in their chain mail. The familiar scent of metal mingled with oil became intertwined with the very identity of knighthood. They would work tirelessly through the afternoon with heavy hearts. After hours of labor, they could feel the residual burn of metal against their skin, a constant reminder of the sacrifices necessary for valor. While the tasks loomed heavily over them, there were moments to reflect. During solitary moments, these knights would contemplate their identities, grappling with the notions perpetuated by a society that demanded excellence. In both literature and law, they were depicted as noble warriors with unwavering honor. Yet, the harsh reality was often one of fatigue and disappointment. The pressures of societal expectations weighed heavily, leading many knights to question their purpose and worth. At the end of a demanding day, knights would return home only to be met with yet another set of demands. The preparations for dinner mirrored the bustle of meal times in the great hall, replete with familiar aromas of cooking meats and warm bread. The hours spent in the workshop contributed to an overarching sense of exhaustion, resulting in muted conversations that unfolded around the fire. In the intimate circles reserved for evening discussions, confidences were often shared in hushed tones. Shared moments of camaraderie would follow as knights exchanged stories from their respective days. Each would partake in delicate victories and defeats captured through shared experiences, betraying the harsh daily grind. As they settled in for the evening, tired from managing their dual lives, thoughts would often drift to the arduous expectations they faced within their current status. Intricate webs of social hierarchy hinted at the ceaseless pressure, reminding them that they were far from simple heroic figures. The intricate tapestry of duty avowed through chivalric code presented both clarity and confusion, a tale of worth. The cycle of daily life for a medieval knight unfolded with a rhythmic monotony. Each day sequenced into another, where ideals coexisted with harsh realities. They existed within a framework that demanded perfection while enduring pressures both visible and invisible. As the final embers faded from the hearth, the night stillness enveloped their thoughts, an invitation to reflect upon both aspirations and fears contained within a knight's journey. The experience of returning to routine allowed for contemplation, movement from one day to the next in relentless cycles of duty. Such is the way of knights, devoted to lives rooted in the weight of responsibility, with duty and honor intertwined in an intricate dance of expectation. In the following segment, we will explore the reflections shared by knights at the twilight of their lives. Emphasizing their perspectives on daily sacrifices demands a closer examination of their personal chronicles. We will delve deep into the memoirs of knights like Sir Geoffrey de Chauliac, revealing individual nuances of what it truly meant to live as a knight during the medieval period. As twilight deepened and shadows lengthened, the thoughts of the knights turned inward. The fires crackled softly, casting flickering lights against stone walls. Within this intimate space, they were increasingly aware of their roles within the larger narrative of knighthood. Reflections of their daily lives often bore the weight of systemic duties, a pattern driven by external expectations and pervasive anxiety about their futures. In our exploration of the experiences of Sir Geoffrey de Chauliac, we find his path echoing the sentiments shared around this evening fire. Born in 1300 in a small town in southern France, Geoffrey led a life marked by the severe realities of chivalry. He entered into servitude at a tender age of 12, joining the company of another knight as a squire. This phase, often romanticized in literature, belied the rigorous discipline and harsh treatment that often came with it. Geoffrey endured a demanding routine from dawn to dusk. His early mornings were punctuated by duties including armor cleaning, caring for horses, and preparing his knight's equipment. These tasks were both physically demanding and time-consuming, often leaving little room for the aspirations of aspiring knights to shine through. The work was required to ensure that the knight was ready for challenges that might arise, whether in the practice yard or on the battlefield. His progression to knighthood in 1325 came after years of unwavering dedication, marked by trials that tested not only physical prowess but also mental fortitude. Records indicate that the exam of initiation was not merely ceremonial, it was demanding and unforgiving, involving techniques of combat and demonstrations of loyalty to the Lord, often culminating in physical confrontation. The ceremony was steeped in tradition, laden with expectations that honored the chivalric code, yet revealed the brutal realities they faced as well. With knighthood achieved, Geoffrey's life was far from a fairy tale existence. The burdens grew heavier. Knights had to provide their own arms, armor, and horses, which meant incurring debts that could cripple families. One of the recurring themes in Geoffrey's recounting of his life was the balance, or rather imbalance, of duty and financial obligation. The life of a knight was often dictated by the intricacies of war and duty. Geoffrey fought alongside his peers in various battles, navigating the treacherous waters of loyalty and fealty. Particularly, the Battle of Agincourt in 1415 provided a clear illustration of the burdens faced by knights. Logistics showed that many knights arrived at the battleground weary and inadequately fed. Historical records highlight that they lacked sufficient supplies, often reduced to foraging for food along the way. The emotional and physical toll was profound, a far cry from the valorous imagery depicted in poems. Both knights and their horses faced the impossible challenge of enduring long marches in adverse conditions, including relentless rain and marshy grounds. The experiences of combat were further compounded by the omnipresent threat of disease, taking its toll not merely on morale but on their very lives. Geoffrey chronicled accounts of illness claiming knights in the aftermath of such encounters, exemplifying the fragility of their existence amid the relentless pursuit of glory and loyalty. Economic struggles were an undeniable reality for Geoffrey and others like him. Knighthood, while offering a semblance of status, was often riddled with financial struggles. Words from his memoirs convey an ongoing anxiety, money spent on armor, horses, and maintaining a retinue weighed heavily on the mind. The dawning realization that the very status gambled for could evaporate in a moment caused turmoil within their hearts. Records indicate that most knights lived at the behest of their lords, reliant upon the success of campaigns for their fortunes. A failed battle could spell disaster, affecting not only the knight but entire households dependent upon their status. Within the realm of chivalric codes, Geoffrey reflects upon the conflict between the ideal and the real, between valorous representation and human vulnerability. Letters exchanged among knights reveal a struggle of conformity to the edicts of the codes while coexisting with personal ambition. The ringing principles of chivalry, courage, honor, and loyalty, held a contrasting reality against the backdrop of constant negotiation and living within the confines of rigid social structures. As the evening wore on, it was customary for knights to share tales of victories and failures, a routine that allowed them to express camaraderie and shared understanding. These conversations often unfolded in a measured tone, mirroring the exhaustion that enveloped their spirits. Each story, though embellished with heroic feats, carried the undercurrent of anxiety and regret, the bittersweet nature of their quotidian struggles. Amidst the warmth of the flickering firelight, conversation shifted to the personal sacrifices endured day in and day out. Geoffrey's peers pondered the core of their identities. Shared laughter could not mask the hidden fears that accompanied their discussions. They mused about what lay ahead, their hopes and wishes tethered firmly to the fading echoes of chivalric ideals, casting long shadows upon their realities. As the night deepened, stories continued to flow, entangled with social hierarchies and the expectations imposed by society. The deeper one probed into their communal sharing, the more profound the understanding became of the urgent nature of these discussions. Frustrations bubbled under the surface, rooted not only in the tasks at hand but also in the burdens of aspirations increasingly out of reach. Each night potentially risking everything for a fleeting moment of glory. The deeply introspective nature of their lives coalesced around themes of identity and self-perception, heavily reflecting upon how the world perceived a knight's role within medieval society. They existed on precarious ground, seeking not merely validation but survival within an unforgiving framework. As Geoffrey de Chauliac recounted his life through the trials faced while navigating chivalric society, one could visualize the various aspects of daily life. From early morning duties to reflections shared under a starlit sky, the kaleidoscope of experiences painted a picture of disillusionment distinctly absent from the typical portrayals of knights in popular mythologies. Now, we turn our attention to a broader examination of knights' daily lives through an archaeological lens. Discoveries within the valleys of ancient battlefields reveal layers of history previously untold. Understanding these remnants allows us to draw connections between lived experiences and broader historical narratives, marking the continuation of their struggles against the backdrop of societal change. The dialogue continues as we uncover these layers in the intricate lives of knights, exploring the tangible evidence that speaks of their reality. Archaeological investigations at battlefields yield vital insights into the lives of medieval knights. The analysis of remnants serves as a window into the struggles faced during their tumultuous existence. Within the context of the Battle of Agincourt, fought in 1415, discoveries reflect both the harsh realities of combat and the daily lives of these warriors. Excavation sites have uncovered a multitude of artifacts, including weaponry, armor fragments, and remains of horses. Records indicate that these finds occurred primarily during extensive digs conducted in the early 21st century. The location of Agincourt in northern France has proven to be especially rich in historical significance. The battlefield remains engaged scholars and historians across generations eager to elucidate the narrative of warfare during this period. Among the various discoveries made at the site, metal arrowheads have been extensively documented. Findings suggest these projectiles consisted predominantly of iron, a common material used during the medieval era. The distinct shape of these arrows implied their use in massed infantry formations, highlighting a tactical evolution that knights primarily faced during this conflict. Each arrowhead reflects not merely material culture but also a profound connection to the lives of those who wielded them in desperate situations. Archaeologists uncovering the area noted clusters of horse equipment, including horse trappings and bits. These remnants represent the essential role animals played in warfare. Estimates indicate that hundreds of horses may have perished on this battlefield. Their skeletal remains often reveal conditions indicative of arduous journeys leading up to engagements. Horses served not merely as mounts but also as vital assets for knights, indicating their importance within the feudal structure. Ceramic fragments unearthed add another layer of understanding. These remnants likely belong to the soldiers' provisions, containing traces of food items intended for sustenance before and during the battle. Scholars analyze these remnants using residue analysis, providing insights into diet during such turbulent times. Evidence suggests a diet comprised of dried meats, grains, and vegetables was common. Additionally, historians have examined the logistics surrounding the battle. Documented records indicated that knights often arrived at their posts exhausted and stressed after long marches. This was particularly true for the English, who faced a grueling trek across France leading up to Agincourt. The discovery of campsites, with evidence of cooking fires and sleeping arrangements, depicts the intensity of their preparation under adverse conditions. Excavation documents indicate the presence of arrow pits, trenches, and protective structures erected by the defending French forces. Archaeological evidence suggests these structures were hastily constructed yet played a significant role in the ensuing confrontation. These defensive arrangements provide further context into the tactical environment of the battle, illustrating the determined efforts of knights and soldiers alike. In attempting to decode the behaviors exhibited by these warriors, researchers utilize an array of archaeological data alongside historical texts. The convergence of empirical evidence and literary accounts offers a holistic understanding of the conflicts faced by medieval knights, at times providing contrasting perspectives on valor and vulnerability. Particular focus has been placed upon the aftermath of battle, as documented accounts reveal the dire challenges knights faced once engaged in combat. Chronicles of the time, such as those by contemporary chronicler Jean Froissart, articulately describe the chaos of battle where knights risk both life and limb. Analysis of injuries sustained during Agincourt has highlighted the prevalent wounds caused by arrows, blunt force trauma, and injuries inflicted by swords. Archaeological evidence, paired with these literary accounts, demonstrates a grim reality for knights. The aftermath of Agincourt engendered lasting trauma, as many knights struggled with physical and psychological wounds long after the fighting ceased. The physical evidence indicated by recovered bones often bears testament to such traumas through fractures, signs of healed injuries, and were indicative of extensive physical exertion. Moreover, secrets unearthed in burial sites reveal the conditions surrounding the deaths of knights. Evidence indicates mass graves often served as final resting places for those who fell in battle. The hurried nature of interment reflects the urgency as living soldiers sought to remove themselves from the haunting aftermath of violence. This also emphasizes a lack of solemn recognition afforded to soldiers in the medieval period, as they were often buried improperly due to the urgency dictated by wartime conditions. Through the study of these archaeological findings, one may better comprehend the hazardous existence of knights outside the battlefield. The overwhelming evidence illustrates a daily life underscored by perilous unpredictability. Each finding from these sites creates a connection, reminding us of the pervasive danger that accompanied every decision they made, whether it occurred on the fields of battle or within their own lands. As we transition into an examination of tournaments, we recognize another dimension of a knight's life, reflecting their pursuit of valor and social standing. Tournaments served not only as a venue for demonstrating martial skills but also offered opportunities for promoting personal legacy in a competitive social environment. The exploration of these events reveals the complex relationship knights maintained with both their peers and the nobility they served. The allure of the tournament was, at once, a promise of glory and a harbinger of risk. Knights participated in these contests not merely for enjoyment but often driven by economic necessity. The dynamics of chivalry intertwined with social hierarchy, creating a stage where fortunes could be made and lost, instilling hope amidst the pervasive struggles faced in everyday knightly life. Next, we shall delve into the cultural significance of tournaments, exploring their evolution and impact on the knightly image as constructed within literature and societal constructs. As we uncover the layers surrounding these displays of bravery, we shall see how they served to reinforce or question the ideals of knighthood prevalent during medieval times. Tournaments unfolded like grand spectacles, becoming central to the knightly experience during the medieval period. They started appearing prominently in the late 11th century and reached the height of their popularity in the 12th century and onward. Initially, these events were marked by their chaotic nature. Knights would engage in fierce contests, sometimes at the behest of local lords seeking to display strength and loyalty, often in direct competition with one another. Literary works of the time describe the fervor surrounding these gatherings. As we explore the realm of tournaments, we observe the preparation involved in orchestrating such elaborate events. Knights would travel from distant lands, often with their retinues, bringing with them hopes of both esteem and monetary reward. Records indicate that in some cases, tournaments were considered essential training grounds where knights could practice their skills away from the battlefield, sharpening their combat techniques amidst more favorable circumstances. The average tournament consisted of a series of jousts and melee contests. A joust, where two knights would charge at each other from opposite ends of a field, was an event of significant risk. The objective was to unseat one's opponent, often using a lance, while navigating the potential hazards of being struck down oneself. These spectacles were preceded by days of preparation. Knights donned their armor meticulously, often wearing garments beneath armor that conveyed their family colors, a display of loyalty and identity. One famous tournament took place near London in 1290, organized by King Edward I. Historical records indicate that knights assembled from across England and beyond. They engaged not only in clashes of lances but also paraded through the streets, their armor shining in the sunlight, horses adorned with rich fabrics. These events served a dual purpose, showcasing the prowess of the knights while simultaneously reinforcing the hierarchical structures of medieval society. Nobles attended, watching their vassals strive for glory. Audiences flocked to witness these contests, creating bustling environments filled with tents and merchants. They sold foods, drinks, and souvenirs, contributing to the lively atmosphere. Among the notable snippets of written accounts detail the different types of activities available to spectators. Musical performances and festive games would unfold alongside the main events, adding layers of entertainment. This environment provided both an escape and an interlude from the hardships of daily life for many attendees. Despite the exhilarating atmosphere, the dangers of tournaments cannot be understated. Although organized and regulated, injuries were common. Knights often faced injuries from splintered lances and felloes or even attacks from their companions during melee events. The consequences of such injuries could be severe, often leading to lengthy recoveries. Historians have uncovered records detailing the injuries of prominent knights, showcasing the precarious balance between glory and risk. As knights reveled in their fleeting moments of triumph, economic pressures enveloped them. Many entered tournaments not merely for prestige but driven by the promise of financial rewards. The risks involved necessitated high stakes. Financial lack fueled anxieties that compounded in the knightly class. A tournament victory could mean securing a vital sum from the pockets of spectators and sponsors. Conversely, failure could deepen the burden of debt already weighing on many knights, as the expense of maintaining armor and horses often exceeded their means. Documents from the period reveal the immense costs connected with jousting and tournaments. One account notes the expenditure involved in the preparation for a single event, including weapons and food for oneself and one's retinue. The potential downside of competition was a genuine concern. Some knights borrowed heavily to maintain appearances and partake in these events, further entrenching themselves in a cycle of debt that could have lasting consequences on their livelihoods. The role of chivalry became a focal point in the tournaments as well. Knights were expected to exemplify this concept through their conduct. The chivalric ideals, rooted in principles of honor, bravery, and respect for women, further complicated the reality of a knight's life. While engaging in the exciting competition, knights were continuously aware of the need to uphold these ideals, even when faced with the chaos of a contest. The tension between romanticized virtues and harsh realities manifested vividly during tournaments, creating an enduring dynamic that shaped the knightly identity. We can observe how tournaments became a form of storytelling for the medieval public. Chronicles often depicted contestants as heroic figures, embellishing their exploits and framing their victories as feats of legendary importance. Such representations imbued knights with a larger-than-life stature, while simultaneously creating narratives that contrasted the harsh truths of everyday life. Cultural depictions further solidified the gap between an idealized version of knighthood and the murky truths of the knightly existence. As tournaments grew in stature, they began to attract the attention of chroniclers and historians. Written records indicate a distinct shift towards a more refined organization. By the 14th century, tournaments became more regulated events, supervised by a tournament marshal. This shift reflected evolving social attitudes towards knightly status and honor. The knight's competitive spirit shifted from chaotic skirmishes to more formatted and structured displays of chivalry. The transformation of tournaments into sophisticated events released a wave of desire among knights to capitalize on these occasions. Their importance surged, embedding them deeper into the fabric of medieval social life. As records show, tournaments often drew nobles seeking more than mere entertainment. They were places for negotiation and display of power, serving the dual role of entertainment and social diplomacy. Subsequently, the elegance of these events was offset by the harsh reality faced by knights upon their return from tournaments. Victories meant little in the context of social struggles. Many found themselves increasingly burdened by social obligations and debts incurred through their participation. Tales of knights returning home broke under the weight of disappointment. They faced jeering peers, debtors, and reminders of an ever-looming financial crisis. Yet, they continued to pursue and participate in tournaments, captivated by the ideal of glory. This paradox highlights the eternal struggle of knights who sought admiration while grappling with the very real aspects of their existence. Their lives were punctuated by ceremonial displays but laced with the shadows of sorrow and anxiety. The cycle of aspiration and obligation persisted. In conclusion, the significance of tournaments permeates through the history of medieval knighthood, illustrating the complexities entwined within knightly personas. The grand exhibitions of valor fashioned by tournaments provided both the thrill of competition and the omnipresent specter of economic concern. The ongoing conflict between emergent ideals and lived realities characterized a knight's existence, impacting their status while simultaneously reinforcing the social hierarchies dictating the era. As we shift focus, we will explore the relationship between chivalry, literature, and reality. By examining various literary works from the period, we can ascertain how these stories shaped and reflected the codes of conduct that knights were expected to embody. The transformation of these narratives will allow us to better understand the societal constructs that inform the lived experiences of knights and their deeper significance within medieval culture. The emergence of chivalric literature during the 12th century marked a significant cultural shift within medieval society. Knights, who once existed primarily as warriors, began to be depicted as symbols of virtue and honor in these narratives. Literature such as the Song of Roland, which dates to around the late 11th century, serves as an early example of this trend. This epic poem, recounting the heroism of Roland, a knight of Charlemagne, presents ideals of bravery, loyalty, and noble conduct. The characterization within this narrative formed a template that would shape societal expectations for knights. Scholarly analysis indicates that the writings of various authors imbued the concept of knighthood with romanticized qualities. For instance, the works of Chrétien de Troyes in the 12th century expanded the archetype of the knight by introducing notions of courtly love. This new emphasis interwove concepts of chivalry and romantic relationships, showcasing knights not only as warriors but also as noble suitors. The knight, now expected to uphold valor on the battlefield, was equally obligated to express affection and sincerity in matters of the heart. As we delve deeper into the literature of the period, we can note the stark contrast between these noble ideals and the realities faced by knights. Historical records reveal that the practical deployment of knighthood often fell short of the lofty morals portrayed in literature. For example, while chivalric codes dictated that knights should protect the weak and uphold justice, many knights frequently acted out of self-interest or profit. This discrepancy laid the groundwork for inherent tension within the knightly class, as individuals grappled with their prescribed roles against their true motivations. The disparity between the ideals promoted in chivalric literature and the actions of knights in practice created a paradox. Historical accounts suggest that many knights fell into debts, primarily due to the costs associated with maintaining their status, armor, and horses. Such financial pressures contrasted sharply with the noble valor espoused in the stories they read. Literature often painted an image of knights celebrated for their courage and generosity, yet the negotiating tables were rife with tales of hardship and dissatisfaction. In addition to portraying valor and honor, chivalric narratives often emphasized the importance of fidelity and loyalty. This loyalty was not only directed toward one's lord or lady but also invoked the concept of eternal bonds among knights. Notable texts illustrate brotherhood amongst knights, yet records indicate that betrayals and backstabbing were not uncommon, contributing to the dramatic tension of knightly life. Such duplicity highlights another layer of complexity, as knights navigated the conflicting expectations of loyalty versus individual ambition. Moreover, the reception of chivalric literature varied across different levels of society. While noble households could afford to invest in literature, commoners experienced these stories through oral traditions or parodies. Plays and tales adapted for popular consumption would sometimes serve to critique the very ideals knights strived to uphold. Hence, common perspectives often highlighted the hypocrisy present in knightly conduct. Such adaptations ensured that the gap between knightly aspirations and reality remained evident throughout the medieval period. To better comprehend the social impact of these chivalric tales, one must look at the records of how knights engaged with the narratives. In many cases, knights would take to heart the lessons contained within these texts. As they sought to emulate the heroic figures depicted, their aspirations often clashed with the everyday realities of warfare, financial distress, and societal expectations. Populations often bore witness to knights in heroic deeds as painted in literature, yet these same knights returned home burdened by obligations, debts, and unrealistic ideals. The cultural significance of such literature grew, influencing not only the behavior of knights but also shaping communal expectations. Scholars in the field often cite the roles played by troubadours, poets who performed heroic tales in public spaces, as instrumental in the dissemination of chivalric ideals. Their performances brought stories to life, forging connections between the narrative and audience experience. The contrast between the performative nature of chivalry and the struggles of the knights themselves has become a focal point of historical scholarship. In reflecting upon the chivalric codes, it is apparent that these ideals did not always resonate with the pragmatic world in which knights lived. Many knights found themselves perpetually encircled by the expectations that stemmed from these narratives. The obligations to engage in acts of valor, uphold loyalty, and pursue romantic endeavors, while noble in theory, often translated into pressures that fueled personal conflict. These pressures could culminate in public failure, thereby reinforcing the cycle of aspiration and anxiety. Historical records of the period reveal letters and manuscripts expressing discontent regarding military engagements and their repercussions for individual knights. Many documented instances showcase knights grappling with the harsh realities of their duties. The psychological toll of warfare further complicated their status, as records largely portray a culture where honor, reputation, and mental health were often at odds. The literary representations of knighthood may have bolstered the image of knights in public consciousness but frequently neglected to portray the internal struggles faced in trying to align their lives with such expectations. As knights strived to embody the heroic elements depicted in literature, they also encountered the inevitability of their human flaws. This duality shaped their interactions within the hierarchical structures that underpinned medieval society. As we reflect on the profound impact of chivalric literature on the understanding of knighthood, we must also examine its influence on the lower social strata. The lives of squires, often young men aspiring to the status of a knight, were shaped by the same ideals. Entrusted with the care of their knight's equipment and reputation, these young men were subjected to intense pressures that mirrored those experienced by the knights they served. The role of the squire involved significant labor and a yearning for recognition that paralleled the quest for glory that knights pursued. The age of service often began around the age of 7 or 8, and many squires fully immersed themselves in the aspirational tales of their superiors. Yet, the reality of their existence rarely mirrored the romanticized adventures they witnessed in stories. Squires faced daily tasks of maintenance for armor and weaponry while being constantly reminded of the required attributes necessary to become a knight. The transition often necessitated proving oneself through combat or competition. Records from various knightly manuals and codes suggest that maturity and proficiency in these skills were paramount for acceptance into knighthood. The stringent pathways to achieving this status reinforce not only aspiration but also a dependence on a rigid social hierarchy. The hierarchical implications of knighthood and squiredom become further pronounced under scrutiny. Many squires would live in the shadows of their knights, maintaining a relationship grounded in service and competition. Such dynamics fostered internalized anxieties concerning worth beneath the lofty ideals espoused in chivalry. The accompanying burden of ambition persisted throughout their formative years, often creating a cycle of longing and discontent. As such, the delicate balance between the inspiration drawn from chivalric literature and the practical realities of knighthood formed a complex landscape for both knights and squires. The societal impact of these narratives can therefore be understood as a two-way street, where ideals influenced actions, while the realities of daily life revealed the limitations of the constructs created. We pause at this juncture to reflect upon the ongoing impact of social structures in medieval society. The intrinsic bindings of feudal obligations often dictated a knight's fate, leaving little room for deviation from the prescribed roles participants were expected to uphold. Next, we will shift our focus toward the life of a squire. We will examine the daily responsibilities and emotional toll faced by these young aspirants. By understanding their conditions, we can better comprehend the foundational steps toward knightly status and the deeper implications on the journey to knighthood within a rigidly hierarchical society. The life of a squire was filled with demands and responsibilities. Each day began early, as squires learned the importance of rising with the sun. Imagine a young boy waking around 5 a.m. He would often feel the chill of the dawn air in the stone corridors of the castle. His shift began with duties focused on his knight, a man he served and aspired to emulate. The young squire dressed in simple clothing, often woolen tunics and trousers, before preparing himself to meet the needs of his knight. The squire would gather his tools, a small cloth for polishing armor, a whetstone for sharpening blades, and perhaps a rag for cleaning leather equipment. These tasks developed discipline and were essential for his future role. After completing his basic morning preparations, the squire would have the duty of tending to the horse of his knight. The animal, a vital part of a knight's identity, required grooming and feeding. Horses were expensive and demanding companions, and their care reflected the status of their owners. As he combed through the horse's manure, he would hear the soft nickering and the sounds of hooves on cobblestones. Records suggest that a knight's horse could cost as much as a small fortune, leading to immense pressure for squires to maintain the animal's health and appearance. Over the years, specific breeds such as the destrier became favored among knights, thanks to their strength and temperament. Squires often learned how to ride, commanding the loyal beasts as they practiced balance and control. Breakfast for the squire typically consisted of a simple yet sustaining meal. Often, it was porridge made from coarse oats boiled in water. Historical accounts indicate that breakfast was rarely elaborate. The squire might also have bread and perhaps a small piece of cheese if it was available. In contrast to the noble households, which enjoyed varied and rich meals, squires' rations were modest. They readily accepted this, recognizing that their time would come when knighthood was finally achieved. As the day progressed, the squire would find himself immersed in extensive training sessions. The heat of the sun would rise, and with it came the call for practice. Knights and squires trained in combat, honing their skills through rigorous exercises. They practiced swordplay, mounted combat, and the skillful handling of lances. The air would fill with the sounds of clashing metal, resonating throughout the training grounds. Documented manuals from the era indicate that training could begin as early as 8 a.m. This regimen seldom afforded young squires any respite. The expectations placed upon them were a reflection of the social hierarchy. If a young boy showed promise and capability, he might secure his position among the noble class, and, in the end, become a knight. Tensions pervaded the training area. Squires would compete against one another, showcasing their prowess. Failure could mean not just disappointment but the risk of falling behind. Records from various knightly manuals highlight the importance of maintaining high standards of physical fitness, often leading to intense rivalries among the peers. Armor maintenance played a significant role in the life of a squire. After training sessions, they would spend time polishing the armor of their knights or even their own. The rough texture of metal against their hands was a constant reminder of the burdens they bore. Each link of chainmail required attention, and each scratch or dent needed repair. Servants would assist, but squires were expected to learn how to keep their gear in prime condition. The time required for armor maintenance often extended into the afternoon. Listening to the sounds of hammers on anvils in the background set a monotonous tone for the day. Historical records discuss an expectation that these young men would become proficient in the care of weaponry and armor. As midday approached, typically around noon, the squire would take a break from the day's rigors. Communal meals were a time of reflection and respite. Squires sat together, sharing whatever meals were provided. The food remained basic: bread, perhaps stews made from vegetables or grains, and sometimes but not always a piece of salted meat. These gatherings allowed them to form bonds with one another, and while they shared laughter, it was often accompanied by discussions surrounding their ambitions and struggles. After their brief meal, they returned to their labors, often beckoned to assist in the responsibilities of the knight they served. This would involve errands around the castle and visits to the kitchens or the armory. Often, a knight would require specific items or wish to send messages, and squires served as their reliable couriers. In understanding the life of a squire, it is critical to acknowledge the emotional burden that accompanied their aspirations. Young boys dreamed of knighthood yet often found themselves trapped in a cycle of endless servitude and competition, reflecting a nuanced social dynamic. Historical documents recognize that many felt pressure to impress their knights, often adopting a mentality equating worth with skill. The transition from squire to knight entailed not only physical readiness but also psychological endurance. Each boy bore the expectation of proving himself in battle or distinguished competition. The chronicled experiences of former squires reveal a clear pathway marked by struggle and dedication. In the recounting of their journeys, many noted the weight of their aspirations, interwoven with the ever-present anxiety connected to their future. At each training session and chore, squires learned lessons extended beyond the immediate tasks. They internalized values that reflected their eventual paths. The chivalric ideals they sought to uphold were often overwhelming. Tales of valor filled their imaginations, yet the daily grind offered little space for those lofty narratives to unfold as they wished. Upon reflecting on the day, squires faced the same quiet chill of the evening that ushered the day to a close. Dinner would often consist of leftovers or what had been gathered during the day. Records frequently mention a lack of variety was common, as nourishment for those in service fell far short of the bounteous meals enjoyed by their noble counterparts. As fatigue settled in, the squire would retire to a simple bed, often little more than a straw-filled mattress on the floor. The contrast to the opulent chambers of knights and nobles became increasingly apparent. Even dreams were limited as they whispered tales of honor and glory. In conclusion, the life of a squire, rich in responsibilities but void of wealth, illustrates the complex dynamics at play. Their daily routines, marked by labor and aspiration, paint a vivid picture of a system designed to nurture but also burden. These young aspirants to knighthood remain distant from the luxuries enjoyed by their noble counterparts, forever tethered to a relentless grind nearly void of respite. Now, we will transition to the broader impact of social hierarchy. We will delve into the rigid structures of medieval society. By understanding the stark contrasts between knights and common folk, we can further appreciate the intricate relationships defined by social class and expectations. The rigid social structures of medieval society cast long shadows over the lives of knights. These structures defined relationships with common folk and nobles alike, creating a distinct hierarchy. Knights operated under a feudal system where their status depended largely on service to their lords. As recorded in numerous historical texts, these obligations often weighed heavily on them. Knights were expected to provide military service, often for extended periods. A knight could be required to serve his lord for 40 days or more per year. During this time, they left their lands and responsibilities behind, relying on the support of their dependents. Accounts from this period indicate that the loyalty they owed to their lords was paramount. Failure to fulfill duties could lead to severe penalties, including loss of land, title, or even dire physical punishments. This expectation fostered an intense loyalty that bordered on servitude. Knights maintained a delicate balance, striving to satisfy their lords while also managing the needs of their own estates. The constant strain of this dual obligation often resulted in a precarious existence. Knights needed to navigate the expectations of their feudal lords while also demanding respect from their vassals. Historical records illustrate the tumultuous nature of these relationships, often marked by resentment and conflict. Knights were not just warriors. They were also landholders, yet their status was tenuous. The land they owned, and its productivity, became a point of contention. If their lord demanded higher taxes or military service, the knight's financial stability could crumble. Historians, such as Richard Caper, noted that many knights found themselves in perpetual debt, caught in a cycle of feudal obligations and economic hardship. The documentation from this time period, including land grants and tax records, showcases the struggles faced by knights to maintain their holdings. Those who could not manage their lands properly often faced dire consequences. The loss of favor from their lords could mean the loss of livelihood, further exacerbating their vulnerability. As they navigated these relationships, knights were constantly reminded of their place in society. Formal gatherings and jousts were opportunities to display their prowess and loyalty. Yet, beneath the pomp and ceremony lay the unrelenting pressure to perform. The social climate was rife with competition, both among knights and between the knightly class and their noble counterparts. Those wishing to rise in status had to prove themselves in various ways. Often, records reveal the fraught nature of these competitive events. Tournaments were held to showcase combat skills, but they also served to reinforce social standings. Noble spectators would watch with keen interest as knights displayed their martial capabilities. Yet, the stakes were often quite high. A knight could suffer injury, humiliation, or financial ruin if defeated. The psychological toll of competition weighed heavily on many knights. In various chronicles from the later Middle Ages, tales emerge of knights who became disillusioned by the pressures of their roles. The need for valor waned against the burden of highly publicized failures on the field. Compounded by the chivalric codes espoused by their society, these pressures inevitably led to stress and anxiety. Historically, the period also shows a divergence in the lives of upper-class nobles. This cultural gap between knights and nobles has been substantiated through numerous contemporary accounts. Differences in living conditions were stark, with nobles enjoying luxurious residences filled with fine goods. Meanwhile, knights, despite their military roles, often resided in less opulent surroundings. As the sun set on a knight's day, it often provided little comfort. The remnants of daily toil could linger. Fatigue spread through their bones, waiting like a spectre to haunt another evening. Knights would gather in their halls, often for communal meals. The gatherings, while filled with bravado and tales of past glories, belied the constant struggle inherent in their existence. Archaeological excavations of castles and knightly dwellings offer tangible evidence of this disparity. The remains of wooden structures, simple furnishings, and modest kitchens starkly contrasted with the elaborate stone castles of their noble counterparts. Artifacts such as cooking utensils and remnants of shared meals reveal a life of endurance rather than comfort. As the evening unfolded, knights would often reflect on the demands placed upon them. The camaraderie of sharing meals was shadowed by the economic pressures they navigated. Recorded instances reveal that conversations often reflected not just past glories, but acute worries about debts owed and obligations unmet. Tomorrow, the cycle would begin anew. The challenges faced daily lay heavily on their hearts as they slipped into fitful sleep. The weight of their social responsibilities pressed against their bodies as they retired to their straw-filled beds. The social fabric of medieval society wove intricate patterns of tension and expectation. Knights, caught in the midst of these dynamics, lived lives of quiet desperation amid the pretense of dignity. The stark differences between knights and their noble overlords painted a clear picture of the endless obligations overshadowing a knight's identity. Now, as we transition from the burden shouldered by knights, we turn our gaze to a day in the life of the noble class. Understanding this contrast reveals the extent of disparities in medieval society. We will explore the rituals and privileges enjoyed by the upper echelons, illuminating the daily existence that stood in sharp relief against the knightly experience. Noble households typically awakened around 7 in the morning. Curtains would be drawn back to allow the soft, diffuse light of dawn to enter. The air was often filled with sounds of servants bustling about, preparing for the day ahead. Servants were essential to the luxuriousness of noble life, their lives unfolded to the tune of their lords and ladies. The noble would rise from fine linens, layers of cloth carefully woven with beautiful patterns. Often, sunlight filtered through the small, decorative windows, illuminating the rich fabrics draped over canopied beds. It was a stark contrast to the knight's straw mattresses. Nobles had the luxury of soft sheets, which were washed regularly and cared for by dedicated staff. After rising, a noble would usually dress with the assistance of attendants. The process of dressing was elaborate. First, soft linen undergarments were put on, followed by beautifully embroidered tunics. Items such as mantles or cloaks were often adorned with real fur or intricate embroidery, showcasing both wealth and personal taste. Each garment required meticulous care and skill in craftsmanship. Following their morning preparations, nobles engaged in their breakfast rituals. Breakfast was a gathering event. Large wooden tables were adorned with linens, and the delightful aroma of freshly baked bread and roasted meats filled the air. Records indicate that breakfast may include items such as spiced ale, sweet rolls, and fruits, a luxury unattainable for many of their knightly counterparts. The gatherings were filled with laughter and animated conversation, often punctuated by discussion of politics and alliances. Nobles were acutely aware of their standing among peers. They thrived on discussions that reflected their status, relishing moments that might forge or break alliances. These interactions were laden with significance, bearing the weight of expectations and social diplomacy. A far cry from the knight's hurried meals, often accompanied by worry and stress. After breakfast, nobles often engaged in leisure pursuits, the most popular of which was hunting. Hunting served not only as a sport but as a critical status symbol. It was an activity steeped in ritual, showcasing skill and prowess. Elite hunting parties typically involved elaborate planning. Detailed records document the roles different people played, from the esteemed noble to the servants who prepared the hounds and horses for the day. Hunting expeditions focused on pursuit of deer or boar. These events were social spectacles, with noblemen exhibiting their wealth through preparation and display. Knights, in contrast, were often barred from such pursuits. They occupied a different rung of the social ladder. The noble would take splendidly outfitted horses, often bred specifically for speed and agility. The quality of their mount was crucial, as it reflected their status. The ornate saddles and bridles crafted from fine leather achieved an artistry rarely seen among knights. Documents from the period depict tournaments and hunts, detailing the rituals surrounding these events. Each participant would wear a unique livery, signifying their rank and house. Discussions during these excursions often revolved around matters of state. Nobles would navigate complexities of alliances and conflicts by sharing insights as they rode through scenic landscapes. The laughter and camaraderie experienced during these hunts starkly contrasted with the knight's formative years spent training alone or in competition. The return from a successful hunt was equally ceremonial, with nobles parading their catches through their estates. They organized feasts to celebrate their accomplishments, with banquets showcasing cooked meat, fruits, and imported delicacies. This display of abundance underscored their wealth and power. Chroniclers of the era recorded details of magnificent feasts, illustrating how the lavishness of noble meals significantly differed from the knight's simple fare. Following such festivities, noble women often turned to the arts. They engaged in embroidery, painting, or music. Records indicate that noble women were skilled in creating decorative textiles or managing large households. Their involvement in the arts was an expected part of their social role, demonstrating both talent and grace. A noblewoman's skill could elevate her standing within society. An intricate tapestry or skillfully composed song could garner admiration and respect. The stark contrast between the knight's life and the noble's existence continued to be evident. While the knight toiled through repeated training and concerns, the noble was shaped and molded by cultural experiences. The world of the knight was filled with combat and obligation, whereas the noble navigated courtly interactions, poetry, and leisure. Evenings often brought about gatherings in grand halls where nobles would retell epic tales of valor and heroism. These tales were part of a rich oral tradition, reinforcing values of honor and nobility. They held court where guests would join in, discussing politics or participating in jest. While knights were expected to be examples of bravery, nobles were often seen as strategists, crafting their legacies through eloquence and persuasion. Nobles had more opportunity for education. Many received schooling from skilled tutors, learning languages, history, and philosophy. Their education was a pivotal aspect of their status, shaping informed leaders. Knights, while educated through experience, could not always afford the same level of education. The risks associated with battle often curtailed their opportunities for scholarly pursuits. As the day waned, the atmosphere would shift towards more formal evenings. The soft glow of candles illuminated the halls. Ritualized evening meals took place in lavishly decorated dining rooms. Records detail feasts featuring multiple courses, fine wines, and rich desserts. The very air was often scented with flavorful spices imported from far-off lands. Noble families would often engage in discussions of alliances during these meals. They monitored household politics, evaluating the opinions and behaviors of family members. One can imagine the underlying tensions present during what appeared to be celebrations. The necessity for maintaining alliances shaped every interaction, creating an atmosphere of careful balance. As the evening drew to a close, nobles retired to their chambers, often reflecting on the day's events. There was a shared understanding of the weight of expectations they bore, even amid wealth and leisure. The pressure to uphold family honor and status lingered, forming the backdrop of their privileged existence. And so, as the sun set on the luxury of noble life, the challenges lying underneath the surface continued to shape their existence. They were throbbing with the same societal pressures faced by the knights, albeit in a different manner. The stark distinction served to illuminate the broader social context of medieval life. Now, we turn our attention to the noble pastime of hunting, which would further elucidate the divide between the upper classes and knights. Hunting, with its inherent rituals and community aspects, encapsulated not just survival, but a cultural significance that reflected the values held by society at large. This examination will delve into hunting practices of the elite, revealing the traditions that informed their status, while simultaneously considering the implications on social structure and class dynamics within medieval society. Hunting, as an esteemed pursuit reserved for the noble class, began at dawn. The sun's first light would gently break over the horizon. Noblemen prepared for the day's hunt with meticulous care. They donned rich fabrics, layering fine cloth that contrasted sharply with the heavy chainmail of knights. Silk and wool in vibrant hues adorned their bodies, showcasing wealth and status. Records suggest that the colors were often symbolic. Noblemen displayed their heraldic emblems, which served not only as identification but also as markers of lineage. The atmosphere of anticipation enveloped the hunting lodges. Servants, trained in the intricate customs of their noble lords, moved deftly. They gathered hunting gear, spears, bows, and hounds were all essential for the day's activities. Archaeological findings from hunting lodges reveal critical insights into the materials and techniques employed. Rarely, however, did these noble hunts include knights as participants. Knights, bound to their own obligations and frequently hindered by military duties, were only occasional attendees in these events. The lord in charge of the hunt, often a nobleman of high status, would preside over the organization. He was responsible for the selection of the location. The hunting grounds chosen were typically vast expanses of woods, teeming with wildlife. Specific areas were designated for particular game, such as deer or wild boar, prized for their size and the challenge they presented. The location signified social rank. Hunting rights were tightly controlled and regulated by law, documented in various legal treatises of the time. Prior to departure, the lord would address his attendants, outlining the expected decorum and conduct during the hunt. Themes of bravery, honor, and camaraderie echoed among the participants. Notes on hunting etiquette demonstrated that even in their leisure, control and hierarchy were maintained. Elders shared stories of past hunts, stirring excitement within the group. Documented accounts illustrate how these tales reflected the ideals of valor celebrated in courtly literature. As the group ventured out, a cacophony of sounds arose. The barking of hounds pierced the morning air. The rhythmic hoofbeats of noble steeds echoed through the forest. The scent of earth and damp leaves filled their senses as they ventured deeper into the woods. This environment contrasted with the knight's routine, confined to rigorous training grounds and stifling castles. The sense of freedom in the hunt stood in stark relief to the knight's daily burdens. When the hunt was underway, the nobles displayed their remarkable horsemanship. Horses became extensions of their riders, responding to subtle commands. Scholars recording hunting traditions emphasized the skill involved in maneuvering through treacherous terrains. The terrain demanded the nobles' full attention. They navigated deep woods and boggy fields with practiced ease. The thrill of pursuit heightened their senses, yet the concerns of the surrounding social order loomed. Every hunt was, after all, a stage for demonstrating prowess. The animals hunted were reflective of the social dynamics at play. For instance, quarry such as deer were less about sustenance and more about maintaining status. Killing such game showcased the ability to procure resources. Historical texts often describe feasts dedicated to the hunt, where animals would be prepared in various forms. The transformation from the forest to banquet table highlights the social rituals associated with hunting, reinforcing the guild of the elite. Upon capturing an animal, the hunt would come to a ceremonious end. The noblemen would gather around their prize, celebrating their success with both feasting and storytelling. The air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and roasted game embodied camaraderie. Such gatherings reinforced bonds among nobles, yet highlighted their differences from knights, who were typically absent from these jovial occasions. The discourse around the tables during these feasts was crucial. Discussions often involved politics and upcoming alliances that could shift the balance of power. The physical space symbolized how the nobility forged relationships and created networks among themselves. It is important to note that not all noble pursuits were as romanticized. There were tensions embedded within this system of hunting, linked with the social hierarchies that defined medieval life. For instance, many sentient creatures used for hunting, including falcons and dogs, were bred explicitly for the upper classes. A specific emphasis was placed on training and conditioning hunting dogs, with records indicating that certain breeds were highly coveted. Meanwhile, the peasants who labored in the shadows of these hunts often felt the brunt of the nobility's desires. Utilizing land they relied on for sustenance, nobles appropriated hunting grounds. Fences were erected, animals were managed to favor the hunts. Conflicts emerged as local communities grappled with these newly imposed boundaries, carefully documented in local parish records. Reflecting on the life of the hunt, one must also consider the gear and equipment involved. The contrast between a noble's ornate hunting attire and a knight's battle armor cannot be understated. Nobles engaged with hunting weapons meticulously crafted for the occasion. Bows carved from fine woods and embellished accessories encountered the light as they shimmered in the sun. Archaeological sites related to hunting often yield weaponry decorated with lifelike designs, emphasizing their craftsmanship. In stark contrast, knights were bound to functional equipment, with little room for artistry as they prepared for battles. A jousting lance, inherently utilitarian, lacked the aesthetic qualities of hunting arms. This duality reflects the values assigned to leisure versus labor within the medieval hierarchy. Amidst all these considerations, one must ponder the emotional undertones of hunting. In many aristocratic families, hunting served as a rite of passage. Noble youths would engage in their first hunts, signifying their transition into adulthood. The expectations of bravery shrouded the activity, intertwining success with the familial legacy. Failure was often met with scorn, especially after discussions echoing throughout the courts. The psychological burdens entwined with these pursuits further elucidate the distinctions between their world and that of the knights, for whom daily rites often revolved around battles and survival. As one final aspect of this elaborate tradition, one should notice how hunting culminated in the political landscape. Noblemen who excelled in this area positioned themselves advantageously within their social circles. Therefore, the act of hunting extended far beyond mere leisure. Nobles frequently parlayed their experiences during hunts into discussions of land and wealth. Evidence from records shows that strategic marriages and alliances often emerged from these leisurely pursuits. The intricate narratives woven through shared experiences painted a vibrant tapestry of medieval life. In this way, we can appreciate not only the sport of hunting but the fabric of relationships within the nobility. The interconnectedness between the nobility and their respective knights emerged through the very act of engaging with nature. However, it is essential to remember that the essence of this divide, the disparity within social structures remained a consistent tension for knights who labored without the luxuries afforded to their noble counterparts. And now, we shall turn our focus toward the contrasts in attire and armor quality between the noble class and the knightly class. Understanding these distinctions allows for a deeper appreciation of the social visibility maintained by the aristocracy juxtaposed against the more functional existence of the knights. This examination serves to illuminate how medieval society delineated itself through material culture, reflecting deeper values and societal expectations. The knights donned their armor with a sense of obligation and decorum. The weight of their metal gear became a part of their identity, a required testament to their role in society. Much of their apparel was cupped in layers of chain mail, designed for protection on the battlefield but lacking the elegance favored by the nobility. The average knight would spend considerable time in their armor. The process of dressing was, by all accounts, tedious. Family records indicate that knights needed assistance in donning the intricate pieces of armor, depicting a reliance on squires. Squires, often young boys in servitude, would aid in tying straps and adjusting pieces. Each clasp and fitting added to the burdensome preparation, requiring patience and precision. The first layer typically consisted of a gambeson, a padded garment worn beneath the mail. This served as a cushion against impacts. Chain mail, made of interlinked iron rings, was then fitted over the gambeson. The sound of metal clinking as links moved against each other echoed through the training grounds. Historical texts show that knights would frequently train in their full armor, acclimating to the weight, a task that demanded physical endurance. The upper body and legs were also enveloped in various plates and greaves, designed to protect vital areas. Such armor covered one with a constant reminder of their station. The armor was often the result of time-consuming craftsmanship. Blacksmiths would forge individual pieces, melding iron with sweat and fire. Knights often visited workshops to have their pieces fitted or repaired, a process documented in records of expenditures over time. On occasion, one would participate in a ritualized cleaning of armor in the company of fellow knights, making it a form of camaraderie. Hours could pass as they polished surfaces, a method not only for maintenance but also for sharing tales of past conflicts. Such gatherings provided a brief respite from the ever-present pressures of knighthood. Once clad in armor, breakfast began to take shape. Knights typically gathered in communal spaces, where tables bore little resemblance to the elaborate displays seen in noble households. Wooden boards offered a firm, utilitarian surface equally used for training and eating. Coarse bread would be the staple for breakfast, accompanied by watery ale. One might occasionally find meager pieces of cheese, occasionally retrieved from the meager supplies warehouses again. Historical records indicate that these morning meals were often suffused with the salt of sweat from morning exercises, shaping an unremarkable yet necessary routine. Comparatively, nobles indulged in richer breakfasts composed of spiced meats and fruits sourced from distant markets. The disparity remained a consistent reminder of status, where every mouthful bore the weight of social standing. The transition to midday would find the knights busy with training, honing skills with weapons that reflected their societal obligations. Here, amid sounds of clanging steel and shouted commands, the seriousness of the knightly fighting arts unfolded. Training often took place in training yards, where knights would run drills, spar with wooden training swords, or practice jousting techniques. At times, tournaments were briefly staged to allow knights to exhibit their prowess, meant more as attractions to attract spectators than practical training. Records showcase successful knights garnering fame through these exhibitions, drawing admirers, and creating rivalries among competitors. The varied displays of skill did provide an outlet for knights to secure favor with their lords, an unending pursuit tied to both their knightly duties and survival. Throughout the day, the sounds of metallic collisions filled the air, joined by the sharp intakes of breath as knights exerted themselves, focusing sharply on improving their skills. Yet, these strenuous sessions were filled with unvoiced fear. Not all knights would emerge alive or unblemished from engagements in battle. These warriors faced not only opponents wielding weapons, but also the shadow of death, their final destination lying uncomfortably close. As training concluded, often around midday, knights shared their meals again. Comparatively, meals were light in comparison with nobles' gatherings. Yes, knights did share sustenance together, yet the atmosphere would quickly touch on deeper currents of conversation. Bonds solidified through shared tribulations also cracked under the reality of debts and lordly demands that haunted them daily. Even as they sat together, laden with the weight of their armor, their faces told stories of competition and personal insecurity, often hidden beneath an exterior of bravado. Always present was the underlying tinge of rivalry that dictated exchanges, as every knight sought to outshine the others in pursuit of fleeting glory. Though they gathered as friends, competition shaped their interactions, reverberating through each bite of food as they recounted tales of past trials, victories, failures, and obligations. As the sun began to descend, the evening hours brought another type of labor. Once the meal concluded, knights would engage in maintaining their armor. A necessary but laborious task awaited them around the training grounds or at their households. Knights often would turn to their attendants for assistance, the relationship between them showcasing the feudal structure in which they endured. The dull clang of metal instruments accompanied the smell of burnt oil, applied meticulously to nourish and protect armor against rust. This tedious work involved several steps, cleaning each link of their chainmail, inspecting the plates for wear, and ensuring that every strap was intact. Scholars have noted that such maintenance not only became essential for protection but also symbolized the knight's dedication to their craft. Hallmarks of quality would often be compared amongst peers, providing further elements of jealousy or admiration. The monotony and grind of preserving armor set the stage for evenings filled with introspective discussions. Wyverns of glory and honor were often discussed lightly, the rare moments of grandeur speaking louder in the daylight than at dusk. Often knights would return mere shadows of the bravado exhibited amongst friends. Later in the evening, as dark spread across the land and torches flickered, knights would gather around simple hearths. They often spent remaining hours regarding who among them had best upheld the chivalric codes that governed their lives. Such gatherings bore tales reminiscent of the very romances that filled the hearts of commoners, straddling the lines between reality and fantasy. Yet as the stars illuminated the darkened landscape, one could sense an ongoing evaluation of self and purpose amongst knights going unexamined. The clothing, the armor, and daily duties all created a cover for deeper reflections on their effectiveness as warriors and their ability to provide for families and answer the call of duty. Ultimately, the return home afterwards exemplified the fatigue of the day. As they approached their residences, knights were cognizant of the masks they bore, needing to present positively amidst familial expectations. They carried the weight not only of armor but also of pride and societal expectation, mirroring that which had been discussed with fellow knights. The day concluded much like it had begun, emerging into responsibilities and silent burdens reflective of their knightly aspirations. The life of a knight was replete with physical and emotional challenges that wove through every part of their daily existence. The tension between duties on and off the battlefield pressed against them consistently, underscoring how they navigated life with a heavy yet unyielding resilience. As these long days echoed their own disappearance into the silence of night, the transitional duties would bring forth conversations of their knightly valor alongside their social ranking. Such reflections lingered deeply in their minds, leading to internal conflicts within as they pondered their capacity for both excellence and failures. Now, we will explore the plight of the squire. Documented as the backbone beneath knightly duties, the experiences of these young individuals provide richer context into the binding societal framework. The responsibilities and trials faced by squires would shape the contours of calculated ambition and dreams within the knighthood structure. The plight of the squire underscores a vital layer within the hierarchy of medieval knighthood. Typically beginning their service around the age of 7, squires would spend their formative years in diligent training, aspiring to achieve knighthood. They labored under the watchful eyes of their knightly masters, bearing responsibilities that extended far beyond mere attendance. The day commenced early, at dawn, even before their knights had fully emerged from their slumber. Responsibilities began with essential tasks. A squire would need to rouse not only himself but also his knight from sleep. A gentle but firm wake-up call was customary. The faint light of morning illuminated the sleeping chambers within heavy stone walls. The scent of wet straw and the mustiness of a wooden structure lingered in the air. As he prepared for the day, the squire would often listen to the distant sounds of farm animals stirring outside, blending with the first calls of roosters in earlier waking villages. Upon acquiring the attention of the knight, the squire would assist in dressing. A complex process that involved multiple layers of fabric, armor, and protective gear. Knights adorned themselves in a strict sequence, which squires learned to navigate through observation and practice. This task primed the squire in understanding the weight and significance of each element of armor. Chainmail would clink together softly as the knight moved, and the heavy weight of plate armor would shift with every action. Documented advice from contemporaneous military manuals expresses how proper attire could mean the difference between life and death on the battlefield. Armor contributed not only to protection but also to one's status and identity. It was vital for young squires to grasp these lessons. The arduous processes of lacing and fastening the complex layers required not only dexterity but also patience. A squire's hands would often bear the marks of the unyielding metal as they adjusted gear for their knight. Once the knight was dressed, breakfast followed. The meals in a knight's household were simple yet hearty. Bread, often rough and coarse, was accompanied by a small portion of cheese and sometimes leftover meats from the previous day. Ale, as the common beverage, filled wooden tankards. Squires would gather these provisions from the kitchen, awash in the rich aroma of baking bread mixed with the smokiness of fire-cooked meats. Keeping up with expectations, they were often to gather many items and offer them at once, requiring an instinctive understanding of needs and desires. During breakfast, the dynamic between knight and squire could offer a glimpse into their relationship. The knight might share anecdotes from his battles, imparting lessons behind each tale of valor and camaraderie. These stories were often surrounding previous encounters or training exercises, exploring the emotional weight of reputation, warfare, and the burdens of feudal obligations. Additionally, during these moments of sharing, there would be a continuous awareness among squires regarding their immediate future. After grooming and breakfast, the time would come for formal training. Squires were expected to practice continuously, honing their technical skills in swordplay, horsemanship, and tactical formations. The preparations for the harsh realities of life as a knight, though full of noble aspirations, bore the deep weight of constant reassessment. Each day began with set objectives, following consistent routines. Historical accounts indicate that such training sessions would last for several hours. This included lessons from experienced knights across various techniques. A sharp clang of metal against metal resonated throughout the training grounds, harmonizing with instructions from instructors invested in developing young men into capable warriors. The sounds of footfalls on soft earth, horses neighing, and the heavy breaths of individuals striving to attain physical endurance painted a vivid portrait of the scene. Physical training could sometimes veer into more strenuous exercises like jumping or running long distances, supplemented by wrestling and physical confrontations, which were a vital aspect of preparation for future knightly duties. Documentation from military texts of the period emphasizes the importance of this rigorous training as crucial to developing dexterity, strength, and an instinctual sense of combat. The educational approach employed by various knightly houses focused on establishing a grounding skill set, which later unfolded into responsibility on the battlefield. As squires toiled, they were surrounded by the imagery of the past. As they trained, they witnessed the scars and further developed their understanding of history. The sense of loss and trauma present on the battlefield echoed in the words exchanged between experienced knights, teaching them about the cost of honor. Each challenge succeeded or failed inspired a myriad of emotions, reflecting the toll of feudal warfare. Once training concluded, knights required their gear to be not only well maintained but also polished to reflect their status among peers. Squires would often spend hours attending to this aspect of their knight's armor. This included ensuring that each piece of chain mail shimmered beneath the sun and that the plate had been mended and polished free of rust. The gentle but rigorous process of maintaining armor involved a connection between each skill learned and the responsibilities flowing from maintaining a warrior's image. Squires, while aspiring to knighthood, often bore silent frustrations as they navigated daily expectations. The realities of their service provided a dual experience. On one hand, they immersed themselves in adventure, thrill, and aspirations, yet in daily lives, they grappled with the absorbent labor of maintaining another's gear, caring for horses, and other household tasks. As a reflection of their ongoing journey towards knightly status, routine meditations led many a squire back to their eventual knighthood. Expectations paired with their own challenges oftentimes led to burdens far too heavy for their individual capacities. The stories of gallant knighthood danced around them, a stark juxtaposition to their labors. After a long day, as dusk began to settle, a squire would retreat to reflect on his ambitions. He often found solace in the simple actions of polishing armor or tending to his master's horse. The coolness of nighttime sunk into the fading day, offering a quiet space for contemplation. Few were the moments to share with fellow squires, as assignments dominated interaction. Yet these shared experiences accentuated a growing bond, a collective understanding of ambition weighed down by reality. An unyielding push and pull characterized the squires' relationships with their knights. The tasks expected of them often instilled feelings of frustration and devotion simultaneously. Not only did ambition fuel their daily struggles, but it also intermingled with admiration for knights on their path. A future of honor and potential sustained a substantial weight against the backdrop of everyday toil. Histories reveal that squires were sometimes sent into battle before earning full knighthood, ushering them into circumstances that would not only test their skills but also influence their identities. Even if they fell short of expectations, the journey remained rich with lessons. Reflections woven through these experiences, as formative as the tasks they performed, complexly shaped the world around them. Now, the journey unfolds to examine the social hierarchies that framed these relationships. The enduring nature of knightly society perpetuated cycles of affirmation and obligation. Knights existed within a formidable system, reliant on feudal lords for their social standing and presence. This made for an ever-pressing need to fulfill demands from those above them, illustrating the constant struggles faced within the layers of medieval life. Explore with me the contrasts of life among the elite, as they navigated their own realms of responsibility, desire, and the societal expectations that would differentiate them from the life of those beneath. From the abundant riches of noble households to the daunting arrays of obligations that bound knights, this examination will yield a deeper understanding of the disarray deeply embedded within medieval knighthood, offering a contrasting lens through which one can evaluate the rich tapestry of medieval society. The decline of the knightly class did not occur in isolation. It was intertwined with the military transformations that swept across Europe during the late medieval period. With the advent of gunpowder in the 15th century and the subsequent rise of infantry and artillery-based forces, the traditional role of the knight began to lose significance. Military records indicate a shift in warfare tactics around this time. Significant battles witnessed the introduction of long-range weaponry, marking a departure from the feudal reliance on heavily armored cavalry. Knights, once considered the elite warriors of their time, found themselves increasingly outmatched. Throughout this transition, armies began to favor professional soldiers over noble knights. Archival documents from various European duchies show that states were establishing permanent armies composed of paid infantry. This development underscored the growing practicality and economic considerations in warfare. Instead of investing wealth in land and horses, nobles began to invest in artillery and infantry, radically altering power dynamics that had been entrenched for centuries. In England, the aftermath of the Hundred Years' War saw the monarchy consolidating military strength, which meant the reliance on infantrymen rather than knights became more commonplace. Records illustrated this shift, showing an increase in the recruitment of crossbowmen and longbowmen, effectively diminishing the prominence of armored knights on the battlefield. The Battle of Towton, fought in 1461 during the Wars of the Roses, showcased this transformation. Positioned against a strong force of foot soldiers, the traditional knightly charge proved significantly less effective in securing victory. The evolution in military tactics coupled with a changing socio-economic landscape further contributed to the diminishing status of knights. As towns and trade flourished, a burgeoning merchant class began to emerge, one that possessed wealth that rivaled that of the knightly elite. Documents from tax records indicate this new class was increasingly able to purchase titles and land, further diluting the traditional bonds of power and loyalty that characterized feudal relationships. As knights became less essential in warfare, their identities began to evolve. Many sought alternative paths, namely into service within royal courts or bureaucratic institutions. Records from the household accounts of various monarchs demonstrate the increasing appointment of former knights as officers in growing bureaucracies, thus redirecting their skills from combat to administration. However, this transition was fraught with difficulty. Knights, accustomed to a lifestyle of valor and physical prowess, confronted internal conflicts as they adapted to the administrative demands of their new roles. Letters and writings from knights during this period reveal feelings of loss, confusion, and resentment. Their lives, once defined by daring and courage, became consumed by daily tasks related to resource management and political entanglements. While some transitioned successfully, many others experienced financial ruin and social alienation. Land that had been inherited or earned through military service began to erode in value, often due to neglect or mismanagement. Historical analysis of land tenure records reveals a growing trend of dispossession among the former knightly class. With the fading importance of knights came an associated decline in the chivalric ideals that had shaped their identities. As knights became entangled in the bureaucracy, instances of chivalry and personal honor were relegated to the realm of antiquity. The tales sung of noble deeds in the courts became distant memories, overshadowed by a more pragmatic approach to life and duty. By the end of the 15th century, courtly literature reflected this shift, portraying knights increasingly as relics of a bygone age, filled with valor but ill-equipped for the realities of changing society. A poignant example of this decline can be observed in the gradual transformation of the tournament. Once a grand spectacle that showcased knightly valor, tournaments became increasingly controlled and regulated as nobility sought to protect their investments in armored men. By the late 15th century, the thrill of competition was often overshadowed by the need for spectacle and entertainment crafted more for the benefit of spectators than for the knights themselves. Despite these transformations, echoes of knightly tradition remained embedded in the cultural fabric of medieval society. Many nobles still sought to uphold the romantic ideals associated with knighthood, albeit in a much diminished capacity. The notion of courtly love, for instance, persisted through literature and art. Poems and songs continued to celebrate ideals of loyalty and bravery, though separated from the realities faced by knights on the battlefield. Reflect upon the way this cultural persistence highlights a fundamental irony. Although knights faced obscurity and diminishing roles, their symbolism continued to thrive. The image of the valiant knight persisted through tales, art, and burgeoning national identities. Records reveal that even as knighthood faded, its romanticized elements survived, influencing the development of emerging national identities, particularly in England and France. By the time of the Renaissance, many of the burdens and responsibilities associated with lives of medieval knights faded. The notion of chivalry transformed into a somewhat convoluted concept, acting as a nostalgic reflection rather than a lived reality. Where once the battlefield defined knighthood, now the traits of knighthood became the subject of discourse in increasingly literate societies. As we contemplate the closure of this chapter of history, it is important to reflect on the socio-political ramifications faced by knights. The gradual erosion of their status facilitated broader changes within medieval society. The peasant revolts of the late 14th century sought to address inequalities that had intensified under feudalism. Historical documents noted struggles among the lower classes who found themselves burdened by debts owed to their knightly overlords. For them, the decline of the knightly class offered a chance for new opportunities. Ultimately, we observe that the twilight of knighthood encapsulated a significant period of transition. The loss of status for knights resonated throughout social hierarchies. The rise of professional armies reshaped the landscape of military service, while the emergence of mercantile classes redefined socio-economic relations. Where knights once unlocked the doors to honor and grace, the landscape shifted toward a world that would favor adaptability and resource management. The echoes of this complex history resonate through the corridors of time, where tales of brave knights transformed into legends of distant epochs. Thus, even in their decline, one can find emblematic reflections that shaped subsequent periods, a lasting reminder of the delicate fabric of existence that intertwined nobility, feudal obligation, and the weight of evolving social order. As we journey forward, our attention now shifts to another element that enriched medieval life. A deeper understanding of the roles of women, who navigated through societal pages filled with expectations and limitations. This will uncover the intricate tapestry of daily experiences shaped by gender relations, duty, and resilience, revealing how women carved their own identities within this historical framework.